Hello, and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist. I'm really glad you made it here tonight. Wherever you are on this planet, this quiet space was made just for you, a small pocket of calm where science and curiosity can meet to guide you toward rest. Tonight, we're not just traveling through history, we're descending into deep time, peeling back the layers of Earth itself to a chapter that lay buried for more than 3 million years. A chapter uncovered by chance, but would go on to change everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. The year was 1974. A team of scientists knelt beneath the Ethiopian sun near a dry riverbed called Hadar. The ground was pale and cracked, shaped by heat and silence, until a glint in the dust caught a scientist's eye. Just a fragment of bone, 2 inches of fossilized memory, but the earth rarely reveals its secrets alone. With each brushstroke, more of her began to surface. A rib, a jaw, a curve of spine, a fragile hand. Piece by piece, a skeleton emerged from the silt, tiny, delicate, and impossibly old. They named her Lucy, after the song drifting through the camp that night, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles. She stood no taller than a child, but her bones told an extraordinary story. She walked upright, like us, yet her arms and fingers still belonged to a creature who lived half its life among the trees. She was a paradox, suspended between two worlds, not quite ape, not yet human. Radiometric dating revealed her age to be 3.2 million years old. Her existence forced science to redraw the very map of evolution. Before Lucy, we believed the mind led the body, that intelligence came first and walking followed. But her discovery revealed the opposite. It showed us that the first step toward humanity wasn't thought, it was movement. So, what did it feel like to walk the earth when the word human didn't yet exist? How did such small, vulnerable creatures survive in a landscape ruled by tooth and claw? What did she see when she opened her eyes each morning? What instincts guided her through the long days between hunger and fear? And what became of Lucy, the ancient traveler who never knew she would be remembered as the first ancestor with a name? Tonight, we will go back in time and we'll walk beside her across the Rift Valley to glimpse what it meant to live in her world. But before we begin, if you're already enjoying this quiet journey together, it would mean so much if you gave this video a gentle like or subscribe to the channel for more softly spoken science stories. And if you'd like to share, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? It's always a joy to see how far this little corner of curiosity travels. So now, take a slow, deep breath, settle into the stillness, and together, let's step softly into the world of Lucy. Long before anyone whispered the name Lucy, the earth moved through an age shaped by quiet upheaval. The world was in the Pliocene epoch, a chapter of time from a little more than 3 million years ago, when the planet breathed differently and the horizon carried a sharper kind of light. It was neither the world we know, nor the world the great dinosaurs once ruled. It was something in between, a moment of transition where life learned to innovate in order to endure. In what is now East Africa, the land opened into wide savannas that glowed like pale gold beneath the sun. Grasses trembled in long waves, stirred by warm winds that swept through the valleys. Here and there, pockets of forest rose like islands in an open sea. Tall acacias cast thin shadows over the ground, and small groves of fig and palm trees offered fleeting refuge from the heat. The air itself carried the scent of dust and ripening fruit, a mixture that signaled both challenge and possibility. The climate was growing drier, year by year, in ways too subtle for any single creature to notice, but powerful enough to reshape the fate of entire lineages. Rainfall became more unpredictable, rivers shrank, Lakes crept inward, revealing cracked patterns in the earth. What had once been lush and shaded became exposed and unforgiving. Yet life responded, bending and stretching to meet these changing rhythms. Across these shifting landscapes, herds moved in restless paths. Early elephants, smaller than their modern descendants, yet still immense, wandered in deliberate lines. Their feet pressed deep into the soil, leaving broad impressions that filled with dust by nightfall. Zebras with simple, early striping patterns grazed in loose clusters, lifting their heads in unison whenever the wind shifted. Small antelope flicked their ears, always listening, always ready to leap. Every moment was a negotiation between hunger and caution. Predators shaped the silence between heartbeats. Saber-toothed cats watched from tall grass, their breath slow and controlled as they waited for the perfect moment to move. Massive hyenas patrolled the open plains, their silhouettes dark against the afternoon sun, powerful enough to challenge almost anything that crossed their path. Near the rivers, crocodiles lurked where the water deepened, their eyes just above the surface, patient and ancient. To survive among such creatures required awareness that never rested fully, not even during sleep. The atmosphere felt different then. The light seemed sharper because the air held less moisture. Sounds traveled cleanly across the open savanna, so a single crack of a twig could ripple outward across great distances. Even the wind had a distinct voice, shaped by grasslands that stretched far beyond the reach of early hominin feet. This was the world being built beneath Lucy's timeline, a landscape sculpted by forces far larger than any one species. Beneath the surface, deep within the crust of the continent, the earth was pulling itself apart. The Rift Valley was opening, ever so slowly, guided by shifting tectonic plates. What felt like stillness to the creatures above was in truth a slow and patient tearing. As the land stretched, it formed isolated pockets, separated by cliffs, volcanic ridges, and widening basins. In these pockets, species were cut off from one another. Isolation created opportunity, and opportunity sparked new forms of life. Some regions grew wetter for a time, allowing forests to cling to the edges of collapsing cliffs. Others dried further, becoming hard flats of sun-baked earth where only the most resilient grasses could take hold. This mosaic of habitats encouraged countless evolutionary experiments. In one valley, creatures changed their diets. In another, they altered their gait. Elsewhere, they refined instincts for cooperation or developed bodies suited for endurance across long distances. Nothing here stayed the same for long. Seasons arrived with unpredictable patterns. Storms gathered on distant horizons, only to collapse before reaching the waiting land. The scarcity of comfort shaped each creature in different ways. Long legs, sharp eyes, deeper lungs, stronger bonds, careful timing. Each adaptation whispered the same truth. The world would not soften for its inhabitants. Life had to meet change with change. In this environment, early hominins began to shift their relationship with the ground beneath them. They felt the pull of the open plains and the need to travel between shrinking patches of forest. Their bodies learned new rhythms that matched this widening landscape. Their days grew longer, their ranges larger. These early steps across shifting soil were quiet, almost unnoticeable in the moment, yet they held the power to influence millions of years that followed. Far above, volcanic mountains watched over everything. Their slopes were dark and steep, shaped by ancient eruptions that had once blanketed the region in ash. That ash preserved textures in the soil, seeds from forgotten trees, and footprints pressed into soft mud. These mountains were guardians of memory, carrying within them the quiet record of an evolving world. This was the world Lucy entered long after these patterns had been set, a world sculpted by dryness and distance and change, a world where survival depended on balance and awareness, a world that held danger at every corner, yet offered endless paths for those who learned how to move through it. It was here, among the grasses and the forests, and the long shadows of predators, that a small being took her first careful steps into a future she could never imagine. And in this place, history waited for her. As the world around her shifted with each season's slow breath, Lucy carried within her body a quiet contradiction. She belonged to a landscape where survival meant understanding both the open earth and the sheltering branches, and her bones still hold that story with remarkable clarity. When her skeleton was first studied, long after the dust of the Pliocene had settled, it offered a question that echoed through every scientific corridor. How could one species belong so fully to two different worlds? Her hands held the first clue. Each finger curved gently, shaped in a way that suggested familiarity with trunks and branches. These curves were not decorative or accidental. They were the echoes of countless climbs, the subtle memory of gripping bark, of steadying herself among leaves as the ground waited far below. Her fingers spoke of balance and careful movement, of a creature who knew the safety of height and the rhythm of swaying limbs. Yet her arms were only part of the story. Her pelvis told something altogether different. It was short and bowl-shaped, a form that guided her center of gravity forward and allowed her legs to support her weight with surprising efficiency. This shape was not typical of tree dwellers. It was the shape of a being who spent long hours on the ground, moving through tall grass and open light. It hinted at hips that could stabilize each step, a stride that carried her across stretches of land with patience and purpose. Her femur added another piece to the puzzle. The upper end angled inward, creating a line from hip to knee that helped keep her balanced as she walked. This angle is a hallmark of bipedal movement. It allows the weight of the body to pass close to the center, conserving energy with every step. No purely arboreal creature carried such a structure. It belonged to one who had learned to trust the ground beneath her feet. When all these shapes were laid out, they created a picture that seemed almost contradictory. Curved fingers that whispered of branches, a pelvis shaped by long journeys across open soil, a femur angled for walking. Each piece spoke a different language. Together, they formed the paradox of Lucy. For early researchers, this paradox sparked years of debate. Some saw her as a direct ancestor of modern humans. Others believed she was part of a side branch, a cousin who shared similarities with our lineage, but ultimately faded into extinction. Each bone became a point of discussion, an argument and a conversation that stretched across decades. Scientists examined tiny scratches on her joints, measured the angle of her limb bones, and compared her proportions to both living apes and later hominins. Every measurement deepened the mystery instead of settling it. At the heart of the discussion was a simple question. Did Lucy walk toward our future, or did her path lead somewhere else entirely? Those who believed she walked upright pointed to the strength in her legs and the clear adaptations in her hips. Her form suggested endurance across uneven ground, the kind of movement that could carry her group from one foraging area to another. These features looked like the beginning of a story that would later give rise to hominins who mastered tools, explored distant continents, and someday walked on the surface of the moon. Those who doubted her direct ancestry focused on her upper body. Her arms were long compared to her legs, which suggested climbing remained an important part of her life. The shape of her shoulders hinted at mobility, better suited for grasping branches than for the swinging of tools. Her torso also retained traits found in species more comfortable in trees. These details suggested she might not have been walking toward the same evolutionary path that modern humans eventually followed. The conversation between these viewpoints became one of the most meaningful debates in the study of human origins, not because it created disagreement, but because it revealed how complex evolution truly is. Adaptations do not appear all at once, they accumulate slowly, shaped by environments that continue to shift and transform. Lucy's body preserved this transitional moment with remarkable clarity, a moment when life experimented with two different kinds of movement at the same time. Some researchers imagined her climbing to sleep among branches each night, curling her fingers around the rough bark as dusk settled over the savannah. At dawn, she might have descended to the ground, stepping carefully through the tall grass as she searched for food with her group. In this rhythm, her mixed anatomy made perfect sense. The trees offered safety and rest, the land offered opportunity and variety. Her form was not confused, it was adaptive. Her bones hold the memory of this balance, a compromise shaped by necessity and time. They show a creature whose world demanded versatility, a world where danger could appear from the grass or from above, a world where the safest place changed with the hour, a world that rewarded those who could belong to more than one space. As scientists pieced together her story, they found that the paradox was not a flaw in her design. It was a glimpse into a crucial moment in our shared history, a moment when life tested new possibilities, uncertain which path would endure. Lucy's form carried both ancient shadows and the first hints of a distant future. It is this combination that makes her one of the most fascinating beings ever discovered. Her bones continue to rest in museum drawers and casts across the world, offering the same quiet question to anyone who studies them. How can a single creature belong to both earth and tree, both past and possibility? The answer is written in her shape. It is the story of evolution, working not with certainty, but with experimentation, moving forward one small decision at a time. Morning in Lucy's world arrived gently, not with the bright certainty of sunrise, but with a slow lifting of the dark. The grasslands changed color first, shifting from deep shadow to a pale whispering gold. Cool air moved through the leaves of scattered trees, carrying scents of damp soil and distant water. The land seemed peaceful in those early moments, yet beneath the quiet was a tension woven into every blade of grass. Dawn did not belong to the small or the slow, it belonged to hunters who used the first light to their advantage. Lucy and her kind understood this rhythm instinctively. Their lives unfolded in the thin spaces between danger. When the sky began to brighten, they moved with care. The ground was a place full of reward, but also full of risk. Each step required patience. Each sound carried meaning. The world was wide beneath them, and every shadow could be more than a shadow. Still, they came down from the trees because life demanded it. Food grew on the ground. Water waited in shallow pools. The day offered opportunities that could not be reached from branches alone. They knew the trees would welcome them again if needed. Even as they ventured across the open land, their bodies remembered the feel of bark beneath their hands. There were moments when a sudden rustle or the faint crack of grass would stop them mid-step. Their heads lifted, their ears turned, their muscles tensed, and in those moments, the trees stood close, steady and tall, offering the promise of height and safety. Climbing was not an afterthought, it was a second home. This constant balancing shaped their days. The ground taught them to watch the world in long arcs, scanning for movement along the horizon. It taught them to travel together, to notice subtle changes in wind, to read the tracks left by larger animals. The trees taught them another kind of awareness, one that came from feeling the sway of branches and the gentle vibration of leaves. Life unfolded between these two realms, one pulling them outward and the other drawing them upward. By midday, the sun pressed heavily on the land. Heat shimmered above the soil, turning distant shapes into wavering illusions. Many creatures rested during these hours, some hidden beneath bushes, others sheltered in burrows or lying motionless in tall grass. Lucy's group would pause as well, finding patches of shade where the world felt still. The trees offered their cool shadows, and for a time the ground felt almost forgiving. There was no need to hurry when the air itself seemed too heavy for movement. Later in the day, when the light softened, the land grew comfortable again. Birds circled overhead, calling to one another in steady patterns. Insects filled the warm air with a low hum. The group moved carefully through the shifting glow, gathering food while the world was briefly calm. The timing mattered. Every decision, every choice of direction, held meaning in this delicate dance between day and night. But as dusk approached, the balance shifted once more. Predators who slept during the brighter hours began to stir. The tall grass rustled with hidden motion. Eyes opened in the shade. As the sun lowered and the world changed color again, the ground grew less welcoming. Lucy's kind felt this shift deeply. Their movements became quicker and their voices softer. The trees, which had watched from a distance throughout the day, began to call them back upward. Climbing in the fading light was part of their rhythm. They made small nests among branches, arranging leaves and twigs into gentle resting places. From these heights, they could listen to the sounds of the night without being part of them. Below, hyenas moved in groups, their steps deliberate and heavy. Big cats drifted silently through the darkening grass, almost invisible. Crocodiles settled near the last glimmers of water. The night belonged to creatures designed for stealth and power. Height became life. This cycle, repeated across countless generations, shaped the bodies and instincts of Lucy's species. The ground encouraged longer walks, stronger legs, and the careful study of landscapes. The trees preserved their climbing skills and kept their arms strong and agile. Both environments left their mark, creating a form unlike anything that had come before, a form that carried memories of the past and quiet hints of a distant future. In this dual existence, something subtle began to unfold. The pressure to move between earth and tree shaped more than limbs or joints. It shaped awareness. Decisions became more complex. Choices had to be made not only for the moment, but for what might follow. Which path was safest? Which tree held sturdy branches? Which sounds meant danger? Little by little, thought began to stretch beyond instinct. This was not the spark of language or imagination. Those belonged to far later chapters. But it was an early shift in how a creature understood its place in the world. Lucy and her kind did not live entirely, as apes had before them, yet they were not human either. They existed in a quiet transition, a place in between, touching two worlds at once. Each day repeated the same long rhythm: light, movement, heat, rest, gathering, climbing. Yet with every season that passed, their relationship to the land deepened. Their bodies changed. Their habits shifted. They became creatures shaped by openness and branches, by risk and shelter, by movement that required constant awareness. In this delicate space where two realms met, the future began to take its first small steps. And without knowing it, Lucy walked at the edge of a transformation that would someday reshape the entire story of life. The world Lucy moved through was a patchwork of shifting landscapes, quiet dangers, and scattered pockets of opportunity. To survive within it, life had to change its shape and its habits. Among the many adaptations that unfolded across the plains, one would alter the course of our lineage more deeply than any other. It began not with tools or fire, but with the simple act of rising onto 2 feet. Walking upright seems ordinary to us now, almost effortless, a skill we learn before we can understand its significance. Yet in Lucy's time, it was a remarkable experiment. Many creatures could stand upright for brief moments, but choosing to travel this way, step after careful step, was something new. It shifted the relationship between body and earth, between movement and meaning. When Lucy placed her feet on the ground, the world opened in a different way. Standing tall allowed her eyes to rise above grasses that might otherwise conceal danger or hide food. Her view stretched farther, her awareness deepened. She could read the land not only by scent and sound, but by the subtle arrangements of shape and distance. This change may seem small, yet for a creature navigating an unpredictable environment, sight itself became a powerful tool. Walking on two legs also freed her hands. They no longer needed to support her weight with every step. Instead, they became available for steadying a child, gathering fruit, or pulling branches aside while searching for hidden food. Those hands, still shaped for climbing and gripping, gained new possibilities because the legs took on the labor of movement. The seeds of countless future inventions began here, quietly, as hands learned to explore the world in different ways. There was another advantage, less visible, but no less important. Moving upright required less energy than the kind of knuckle supported walking used by other apes. Each step Lucy took was efficient, spending little energy while covering more ground. In a landscape where food could be scarce or widely spaced, this efficiency mattered. It allowed her group to travel farther with fewer resources, giving them access to new patches of fruit, roots, and insects that might be out of reach for other species. But bipedalism did not come without cost. Standing tall exposed the body to predators, especially in open grasslands. It reduced speed, making sudden escapes more difficult. A creature who ran on two legs could not match the quick bursts of a four-legged animal. Every movement was a negotiation between the benefits of height and the vulnerability of upright posture. Lucy lived within this balance, trusting her awareness and timing to keep her safe. Despite its risks, the shift toward walking persisted. Over generations, the bodies of her species adapted to support this new style of movement. The curve of the spine, the breadth of the pelvis, the angle of the thigh bone, all shaped by the steady rhythm of countless journeys. Her feet, with their arched structure and forward-pointing toes, reveal how the ground shaped her evolution. Each feature formed slowly, carved by the demands of walking across landscapes that stretched far beyond the safety of trees. We see evidence of this transformation not only in her skeleton, but also in a trail of footprints preserved in ancient volcanic ash. These footprints lie in a region known today as Laetoli, in what is now Tanzania. There, long before history had a name, a small group of early hominins walked across soft ash that had settled after a distant eruption. Rain lightly dampened the surface, turning it into a canvas. Their feet pressed into it, one step followed by another, creating impressions that recorded weight, stride, and movement. When the sun returned and the ash hardened, the footprints became part of the land. Over time, they were buried, sleeping beneath soil and stone until they were uncovered millions of years later. The Laetoli footprints are quiet, delicate memories of a moment long vanished. They show a being who walked much like we do today, heel first, with toes pointing forward. They show balance, confidence, and familiarity with the ground. While we cannot know for certain whether these prints belong to Lucy's species, they reveal a way of moving that her kind had embraced. They are proof that the shift to walking had already taken hold, shaping the future in ways no one living then could have understood. Walking changed everything, not through sudden transformation, but through patient accumulation. Each step nudged evolution in a new direction. Each journey carried a small spark of possibility. With walking came new landscapes to explore, new challenges to face, new ways of thinking shaped by distance and movement. Creatures who walked upright could travel farther, interact differently, and perceive the world with new clarity. Over time, these subtle shifts created the foundation upon which later hominins would build. It is strange to imagine that the quiet rhythm of walking, so familiar to us now, once carried the weight of an evolutionary gamble. Stranger still to consider that this gamble succeeded so completely. From those early steps across the Pliocene plains, a path extended into the deep future. It led to migrations across continents, the shaping of tools, the building of civilizations, and eventually to feet that touched places no early hominin could have imagined. Long after Lucy rested beneath ancient soil, her distant descendants would take those upright steps across ice sheets, deserts, and oceans. Much later, they would carry that same posture into the vacuum of space, leaving footprints on a surface untouched by life. The journey from those early footprints to the footprints on the moon did not happen all at once. It happened in quiet increments, beginning with beings like Lucy, who learned to rise in a world that did not always welcome the height. Walking did not simply move a body across land, it moved an entire lineage into a future that was still waiting to be written. In the slow rhythm of her steps, a new chapter of life began. In the world Lucy inhabited, survival was shaped not by size or strength, but by the quiet mathematics of adaptation. Every creature carried a body tuned by time, and her own form held a delicate balance of features that revealed how life adjusted to shifting landscapes. She did not tower over the plains or move with the speed of predators. Instead, her strength unfolded in subtle ways, in proportions and structures shaped by countless seasons of change. Her brain was small, closer in size to that of modern apes than to our own. It measured only a few hundred cubic centimeters, roughly the volume of a large grapefruit. Yet this number does not tell the full story. Intelligence is not only a matter of size, but of how a creature reads its world. Lucy's mind was shaped for pattern and memory, for noticing the rhythm of days and the habits of other animals. It helped her understand where food appeared after rainfall, which paths remained safe, and which sounds signaled danger. Adaptability, not intellect, was the anchor of her survival. Her hips reveal a different kind of evolution, one tied to both movement and motherhood. They were wide and rounded, shaped in a way that supported her upright posture. This structure helped her balance as she walked and allowed her legs to swing forward with each step. At the same time, the shape of her pelvis reflects the demands of childbirth. Her young were born with growing brains, and the hips needed enough space to guide a newborn into the world. The result was a compromise between movement and reproduction, one that set her species apart from earlier ancestors who lived mostly in trees. Her legs tell the story of long journeys across uneven ground. They were strong and sturdy, not built for speed but for endurance. The muscles that once held her upright now appear only as subtle clues in fossil bone, yet they speak of a life spent traveling from grove to grove, from rocky patches to distant pools of water. Her knees locked in a way that allowed her to stand for long periods without wasting energy. Her thigh bones angled inward to keep her balanced as she walked. Each feature was shaped by landscapes that demanded patience rather than power. Her feet were tools crafted by the earth. They carried arches that helped absorb the impact of walking, lifting her step above the flat-footed gait of earlier apes. Her toes pointed forward instead of grasping, a sign that life on the ground had become central to her survival. Yet even as these features evolved, her hands held a memory of the trees. Her fingers were long and delicate, curved in a way that allowed her to climb when needed. They could gather fruit, pull down branches, or support her as she moved upward into shelter. These hands were not meant for shaping tools or carving stone. They were built for balance and touch, for a life that required both caution and mobility. Natural selection worked quietly around her, shaping small advantages over generations. The individuals who moved efficiently across open land, who could travel farther with less effort, who could climb when needed and descend with care, were the ones more likely to survive long enough to raise young. Those small advantages accumulated, reshaping bones, muscles, and habits. Efficiency became a form of protection. Strategy, not raw strength, guided the path of her lineage. The open plains tested these strategies every day. Food was scattered, water sometimes scarce, and shelter unevenly spread across the landscape. Being able to move steadily, without exhausting energy, became essential. A slow but careful walker could outlast faster animals that tired quickly. An observant traveler could avoid danger that lurked in grass or shadow. In this world, the creature who endured was the one who lived. Even her breathing and posture reveal this shift toward life on the ground. Her ribcage angled in a way that supported a more stable torso while walking upright. Her blaze spine curved gently, helping distribute weight so that her head remained balanced above her shoulders. Together, these features created a body suited not for bursts of power, but for long moments of vigilance and steady travel. Living with such a body meant learning to use it well. Lucy did not simply move through the world. She negotiated with it. She chose paths that offered both safety and resources. She timed her movements with the behavior of larger animals, taking advantage of moments when predators rested or territories lay quiet. Her survival came from knowing how to place each step, how to shift her weight while climbing, how to balance the needs of her group with the risks of the land. Adaptation became her greatest inheritance. In a place where droughts could change the shape of whole seasons, where trees could disappear and return depending on the climate, her species relied on bodies that could adjust to change. The world did not offer stability, so life created its own flexibility. This is the quiet genius of her anatomy, the way every curve and angle reflects the long conversation between creature and environment. Her body carried the memory of two worlds and the potential for many more. Through its intricate design, shaped by time and necessity, it shows how survival is often a matter of balance rather than dominance. In her proportions, in her limbs and hands, in her hips and spine, there is a record of endurance written in bone. The world that shaped Lucy's body also shaped her mind, guiding it through rhythms far older than spoken words. Her intelligence did not unfold through symbols or stories. It lived in the spaces between action and awareness, a quiet form of thinking that rose from experience rather than imagination. Her mind grew from the land itself, shaped by the patterns she learned to recognize and the memories she carried from season to season. Each day offered lessons. Some came from the sound of distant movement, others from the shape of a tree or the smell of ripe fruit carried on a shifting breeze. Lucy learned these things not through teaching, but through living. The land repeated its messages, and she absorbed them until they became part of her. Her memory was a map made from sensations and moments, a map that guided her long before language could describe its paths. She remembered safe routes across open ground, narrow corridors of tall grass where predators rarely traveled. She knew which clusters of trees offered places to climb quickly and which ones held loose, unreliable branches. The patterns of her world arranged themselves quietly in her mind, forming a network of knowledge that helped her navigate danger even without understanding it in words. Predators taught some of these lessons. A distant growl, the sudden silence of insects, the ripple of grass where a large body passed by. These signs did not simply frighten her. They became signals that shaped her decisions. Over time, she recognized which sounds meant she should freeze, which meant she should climb, and which meant she should move away while there was still time. This understanding was not abstract thought, it was something deeper and older, an instinct refined by memory. Her awareness extended beyond survival. She lived within a group, and social bonds shaped her thoughts as much as shifting landscapes did. Emotional understanding was part of her world, an early form of consciousness expressed through movement and presence. She felt comfort when surrounded by familiar bodies. She sensed fear when a companion panicked. She understood reassurance in the gentle touch of another hand or the soft sound of breath during shared rest. In these moments, her mind flickered with emotions that helped guide her behavior. Curiosity nudged her to explore fruiting branches or new patches of ground. Anticipation encouraged her to approach pools that often held fresh water after rainfall. Affection kept her close to her kin, especially in times of uncertainty. These feelings did not require a spoken language to exist. They flowed naturally, part of the ancient conversation between the body and the world. There were times when she paused, not because something moved in the grass, but because something stirred inside her. These pauses revealed a different kind of awareness, one that hovered just before thought as we know it. It was not reflection in the human sense. It was something softer, like the sensation of noticing a change without naming it. Perhaps she stood still beneath a canopy of leaves, watching the shifting pattern of light. Perhaps she listened to the distant call of an animal she did not need to fear. In such moments, something like contemplation touched her mind, a quiet spark that came from simply being alive in a world filled with sound, color, and movement. Her relationships carried this spark as well. She navigated subtle hierarchies within her group, sensing when to yield and when to hold her place. She understood the signals that coordinated movement within the group, the small touches and glances that guided them toward food or away from danger. These interactions required awareness of the intentions of others, a foundational form of understanding that would one day bloom into empathy and cooperation in later hominins. Her mind stored memories of seasons, not as stories but as embodied knowledge. She remembered how the air smelled before a storm, how the ground felt when the rains had returned, how shadows lengthened differently at certain times of year. These memories guided her choices, helping her know when to stay and when to travel, when to climb and when to descend. Even the search for food demanded a kind of quiet reasoning. She learned which plants ripened at specific times, which trees held insects beneath their bark, and which rocky areas concealed edible roots. She explored with caution but also with curiosity, testing new sources of food and filing the results away in her mind for future use. This blend of instinct and learned behavior formed the foundation of her survival. Her awareness expanded into the night as well. Though she rested among branches when darkness settled across the land, her senses remained alert. She could distinguish between the rustling of wind and the cautious movement of a nocturnal animal. Her dreams, if she had them, would not have been filled with images or narratives. They might have been echoes of the day, sensations of heat or hunger, vibrations in branches, or the rhythmic sway of leaves. The early stirrings of consciousness lived within these experiences, not the reflective, layered consciousness that humans possess, but a simpler form rooted in sensation, memory, and emotion. Her mind allowed her to anticipate, to react with nuance, to draw meaning from patterns, and to express a kind of presence that extended beyond mere instinct. She lived at the threshold between automatic behavior and thoughtful response, her awareness shaped by a world that demanded both vigilance and exploration. Although Lucy could not imagine her own future or reflect on her past, she carried a mind that allowed her to navigate a complex environment with grace. It was a mind that bridged the ancient world of instinct and the emerging world of thoughtful action, a mind that provided the first quiet hints of what would one day become human consciousness. The world Lucy walked through was wide and unpredictable, and within that shifting landscape, her species learned that survival began with togetherness. Fossils discovered in clusters, sometimes scattered across old riverbeds or gathered near ancient resting sites, reveal early hints of group life. These remains do not speak with voices, yet their nearness to one another suggests that individuals traveled, fed, and rested as a small community. From these quiet traces, we begin to understand the tribe that shaped Lucy's days. A group likely held 10 to 20 individuals. They moved as a loose, flexible circle rather than a strict formation, adjusting their spacing as the land demanded. Adults guided the pace, younger ones followed with watchful curiosity, and infants clung to the warmth of caregivers. This blend of ages and abilities created a flowing pattern of movement, a kind of living fabric held together by shared instinct and mutual reliance. In the early hours of morning, the light spread slowly across the savannah. The group descended from the trees where they had rested. The air carried the freshness of cooling night, and for a brief time the land felt calm. Moving together in these gentle hours allowed them to search for food while the world was still waking. The oldest members remembered where certain fruits ripened first after seasonal rains. Others knew the hidden places where insects gathered. These memories guided the group not through language, but through shared direction. Food was rarely abundant in a single place. When one individual found a cluster of edible plants or insects beneath lifting bark, the discovery often drew the group into a quiet circle. Each took small amounts, adjusting their movements to avoid conflict. Generosity had practical value. Sharing food strengthened bonds, and bonds strengthened survival. A member who shared today might be helped later, whether during a moment of danger or a season of scarcity. This sense of collective responsibility extended especially toward the young. Infants were carried often, their small bodies pressed securely against fur and skin. Although the mother bore the primary role, others contributed in small, essential ways. An older sibling might steady a toddler learning to walk. Another adult might lift an infant briefly during travel. These moments of shared care eased the burden of parenthood in a world where every extra hand improved the group's chances. Emotional connection flowed through these interactions, even without words. A brief touch, a soft call, the calm presence of another body nearby, all communicated reassurance. Fear moved through the group as well, quick and contagious, but fear became easier to manage when distributed across many eyes and ears. The group's unity formed an early version of what would later evolve into the human sense of belonging. It was not culture or identity, but the first spark of us, carried in instinct and strengthened by experience. Within this early form of community existed another layer of complexity, one shaped by mating and kinship. Fossil evidence from Lucy's species shows a noticeable difference in size between males and females. This pattern, called sexual dimorphism, offers clues about their social structure. In many animals, larger males often compete for access to mates, while smaller females invest more in raising the young. The degree of dimorphism in Australopithecus afarensis suggests that their society may have resembled that of gorillas or chimpanzees more than that of later humans. If their system was similar to gorillas, a few dominant males could have held mating rights with multiple females. In such a group, competition between males might have been present, expressed through displays, vocalizations, or physical presence rather than constant aggression. If their system was more like chimpanzees, social bonds and shifting alliances could have influenced mating access, creating a complex web of relationships where strength, timing, and cooperation all played subtle roles. Whatever the exact pattern, Reproduction in a dangerous environment demanded careful strategy. Infants needed long periods of care before gaining independence, and mothers could not raise young alone while also protecting themselves. The presence of additional adults, especially those with experience, increased the likelihood that an infant would survive through its vulnerable years. These older individuals helped guide movement, shared food when needed, and added layers of protection by watching the landscape with practiced eyes. The hierarchy within the group likely reflected both physical strength and social connection. A strong male might influence where the group moved or how disputes were resolved. Older females, with their deep knowledge of seasons and food sources, likely held quiet authority as well. Their experience guided choices that affected the group's survival. Younger members learned by watching them, by following the subtle cues in their body language and movement. Kinship was not marked by spoken labels, yet it was deeply felt. Mothers recognized their offspring through scent and touch. Siblings remained near each other, forming small clusters within the larger group. Individuals showed preference for familiar companions, choosing to rest closer to those they trusted. These bonds created strands of stability within a world filled with uncertainty. The tribe lived within the flow of the day, moving and resting in sync with one another. When danger rose from the tall grass, the reaction spread like a wave through the group. When safety returned, calm settled across them slowly, like dust settling after a passing wind. Their unity did not erase the challenges around them, but it allowed them to meet those challenges with shared attention and shared instinct. In this early community, shaped by movement, risk, and care, we glimpse the beginning of something remarkable, a way of living rooted not only in survival but in connection, a way of belonging that would grow deeper, more complex, and more meaningful as countless generations followed. Life in Lucy's world unfolded under the slow passage of seasons, and within this rhythm the bond between mother and child held a quiet, enduring strength. The shape of Lucy's pelvis, broad and curved in ways that supported upright walking, also reveals something deeper about her species. It tells us that giving birth was not simple, and that infants arrived in the world fragile and unready, needing long periods of care before they could move with confidence. This vulnerability shaped the behavior of mothers, and through them the behavior of the entire group. An infant of Australopithecus afarensis entered life with a small body and an even smaller spark of independence. Unlike many animals that can stand or walk within hours, these young ones depended completely on the arms that held them. Their heads were large enough to require careful support, yet their minds were still in early stages of development. They needed warmth, food, and constant protection from a world filled with predators and unpredictable danger. A mother carried her infant almost always. She supported the child against her side or chest as she traveled across uneven land, climbed branches for safety, or searched for food among grasses and scattered trees. The weight of this tiny life rested on her arms, her hips, and her endurance. There were no periods of rest from this responsibility. Even when fatigue crept into her limbs, she continued to hold and protect her child, moving slowly at times, pausing when necessary, always aware of the little breath pressed against her skin. This constant contact created a deep bond. The infant learned the world through the rhythm of the mother's movement, the pattern of her breathing, and the subtle vibrations of her voice. The mother, in turn, learned the child's needs from its body language, its soft sounds, and the way it tensed or relaxed in response to the environment around them. These exchanges formed a quiet dialogue long before any words existed. But motherhood in Lucy's world was not a solitary endeavor. The landscape was too harsh, and the demands of survival too constant for one individual to bear all responsibility. Others in the group stepped in when needed. A younger female might lift an infant for a short time while the mother fed. An older individual might slow the group's pace so that the mother did not fall behind. This sharing of responsibility did not follow strict roles. It emerged naturally from the way their group lived, from the instinct to protect the vulnerable and to strengthen the chances of the entire community. Shared parenting was subtle but significant. It reduced the burden carried by mothers and increased the likelihood that infants would survive to adulthood. In a place where danger could appear at any moment, where food was not guaranteed, and where travel required stamina, this kind of cooperative care became an essential strategy. Every extra pair of eyes helped. Every gentle hand that steadied a tottering youngster improved the infant's chance of reaching the next day. This attentiveness to the young fostered early forms of empathy, not empathy as understood in later human societies, but a simpler, more instinctive sensitivity. Individuals responded to the distress of infants, approaching them with calm movements. They recognized the value of nurturing and felt compelled to ease the strain on mothers when possible. This emotional awareness strengthened group bonds and shaped the social structure of their community. The young observed these behaviors as they grew. A child who clung to its mother during the earliest months would later cling to siblings or other companions as it began to explore the world. Through watching and imitating, they learned how to interact with others, how to navigate the group's movements, and how to recognize danger or safety in the expressions and gestures of their companions. These early experiences carved pathways that shaped their understanding of group life. The extended period of dependency influenced the pace of their development. Growing slowly allowed young ones more time to absorb the knowledge needed for survival. They learned the safe paths across the savannah, the locations of fruiting trees, and the ways their group communicated through posture and sound. Their long childhoods created space for learning not just from their mothers, but from the group as a whole. This prolonged reliance also encouraged patience within the community. Older individuals tolerated the clumsiness of the young, allowing them to practice climbing, walking, and foraging close by. These moments were quiet exchanges of stability and reassurance. A misplaced foot, a startled cry, a hesitant movement towards something new, all were met with gentle presence rather than rejection. Through these interactions, the tribe built invisible threads of connection. These threads were not shaped by intention or planning. They simply formed from repeated acts of care. Over time, each generation strengthened the next, not with tools or language, but with the early emotional foundations that would one day allow complex societies to emerge. The bond between mother and child lay at the center of this structure. It served as the anchor that held the group together and gave it resilience. The instincts that guided mothers to nurture their infants through exhaustion, the impulses that led others to help, and the willingness to protect the fragile young all contributed to a shared understanding of unity. In these small acts of support, the first outlines of a future humanity appeared. The seeds of cooperation, patience, and emotional awareness took shape long before people could name them. They grew within the gentle cradle of motherhood, within the cooperative arms of a group that understood, even without words, that life thrived when it was held together. Before clocks, before calendars, before any device existed to divide life into measured pieces, Lucy's world was guided by the slow pulse of light and darkness. Each day unfolded with a gentle rhythm shaped by the land itself. The sky, the wind, the warmth of the soil, the quiet warnings carried through sound and scent all told her when to move and when to rest. Her life did not follow numbered hours. It followed sensations, patterns, and instincts refined through countless generations. Dawn began softly. A cool mist gathered low across the grasslands, touching every blade with a thin silver shimmer. The air felt almost still, yet it carried the hum of insects waking beneath the leaves. Farther away, faint calls drifted through the morning. Some were the voices of birds testing the quiet. Others came from animals stirring among distant trees. These sounds did not startle her. They were part of the familiar fabric of early light, a gentle reminder that the world was returning to motion. Lucy and her group descended from their resting places in the trees. Branches still held the coolness of the night, and the bark felt damp beneath their hands. The ground below was soft and shadowed, calm in a way it never was later in the day. Early light offered the safest window for movement. Predators, who ruled the night, lingered in their own moment of transition, not yet ready to hunt again. This short span allowed Lucy and her companions to begin searching for food with a measure of confidence. Foraging was a slow, attentive process. The group fanned out across familiar patches of land, guided by memory rather than intention. Leaves rustled beneath their feet as they moved through grasses dotted with early flowers and scattered seed pods. Lucy lifted branches to look for insects hiding just beneath the bark. She smelled the air to detect the sweetness of ripe fruit. She crouched near small plants whose roots sometimes held enough moisture to ease thirst. Each discovery was small and often fleeting, yet together these moments created the beginnings of a meal. The early light also revealed the subtle changes in the land since the day before. A fallen branch, a trail pressed lightly into soft soil, a new cluster of tracks near a water source. These clues helped Lucy decide where to move next. She recognized signs that others might overlook: the faint imprints of hooves, the scent carried on a change in wind direction, the silence that settled when unseen animals paused. Her mind, shaped by instinct and memory, guided her through the opening hours of the day. By late morning, the sun rose higher. Its warmth began to press into the ground, drawing thin waves of heat from the earth. The grass shifted from cool green to a pale golden color, and the insects grew louder. Lucy felt the heat settle onto her back and shoulders. Her movements slowed. Even the wind seemed to lose its earlier sharpness, becoming warm and heavy. Midday arrived with a stillness that held both calm and danger. Under the strongest light, many creatures retreated to the shade. Lucy and her group did the same. They found shelter beneath scattered trees or along the edges of rocky outcrops where shadows lingered longer. Here they rested, their bodies relaxed but their senses still alert. The land might appear peaceful, yet the openness made them vulnerable. A sudden movement far away could ripple into awareness within the group. Heads would lift, eyes would narrow. Then, if the threat passed, the group would return to quiet. During this stillness, infants slept against the warmth of their mothers. Older individuals groomed one another, cleaning dust and loose fur with careful movements. These small acts strengthened the group in ways not easily seen. They eased tension and reinforced the subtle bonds that kept the tribe united. Lucy watched the patterns of light shifting through leaves, letting the moment settle until the heat softened again. As the afternoon progressed, shadows began to lengthen across the land. The air cooled slightly, and the pace of movement increased. Lucy and her group resumed their search for food. They followed paths that curved gently between clusters of trees and open grass. The land glowed in muted colors as the sun dipped lower, and the sounds around them grew richer. Birds prepared for night. Small animals rustled carefully through bushes. The world felt awake in a different way, alert but not yet ruled by darkness. When the sky turned orange and the first stars waited behind the thinning light, Lucy felt the day shifting into its final stage. Night moved quickly in this part of the world. Shadows deepened. The scent of the air changed, carrying the cold breath of evening. The group responded without hesitation. They moved toward the trees where they had slept before, selecting familiar trunks and low branches easy to climb in fading light. Climbing was an instinctive motion, a return to safety. Fingers curled, around bark. Toes found reliable footholds, worn smooth by many nights. High above the ground, Lucy settled into a small cradle of branches. The leaves muffled the sounds of the land below. The wind, cooler now, brushed gently against her face. The group gathered above her and around her, creating a web of presence that eased the quiet vulnerability of night. As darkness settled fully, the world below shifted into a different rhythm. Predators stepped into the open, the grass whispered with hidden movements. Yet, from the branches, Lucy watched only the dim patterns of moonlight. Her breathing slowed. The warmth of nearby bodies surrounded her. The day, with all its searching and waiting and traveling, faded into the background. Night held its own dangers, yet it also held rest. High above the ground, in the safety of branches shaped by instinct and memory, Lucy entered the soft stillness that carried her toward another dawn. In the world Lucy inhabited, danger was not an occasional visitor. It was a permanent presence, woven into every movement and every breath. The land around her held both promise and peril, and the line that separated the two was as thin as a shadow. Her species lived without the comforts that later humans would discover. There were no tools shaped to defend against claws or teeth, no fire to draw a protective circle around the night. What they carried instead was awareness, sharpened not by thought but by instinct. This awareness guided every decision. Even in moments of calm, Lucy listened to the subtle language of the world. The wind carried stories. It brought the scent of water or distant fruit. It brought the musk of predators too. A change in its direction could shift her path. If it brushed against her face with a certain sharpness, she understood to move carefully. If it arrived without warning from behind, she paused, uncertain who else might be moving through the grass. Near the rivers, where the land dipped into patches of mud and tall reeds, crocodiles lay still beneath the surface. They waited with a patience older than any hominin species. Their bodies looked like stone from a distance, their eyes barely visible above the water's edge. Lucy knew this danger without needing to examine it closely. Her group approached water carefully, listening for the faint splash or ripple that might reveal something hidden. They drank quickly, their heads lifting often, scanning the banks for shapes that did not belong among the reeds. Grasslands offered a different kind of threat. Saber-toothed cats moved through the tall grass with silence so complete that even the insects seemed unable to detect them. These predators were built for suddenness. Their movements were fluid and almost invisible until the final moments of a hunt. Lucy did not have the speed to outrun them. Her only protection came from noticing the world before the danger stepped fully into it. A sudden stillness in the grass could signal that something large had paused nearby. A faint disturbance in a flock of birds could signal movement from a predator hidden below. A broken twig in the distance could mean a heavy body shifting its weight. These sounds were not warnings in the way humans use the word now. They were simply information, but information that meant life. Lucy's instinct was not a conscious calculation. It was an ancient rhythm, the same rhythm that guided many animals across time. Her muscles tightened before she fully understood why. Her heart quickened at the presence of danger long before her eyes confirmed it. Her senses worked together in a way that made reaction possible, even when thought lagged behind. This instinct was not perfect, but it was her best weapon in a world where she lacked claws, fangs, or natural armor. Moving across open land required constant attention. Each step had to be placed with care. The group navigated the grasslands with a pattern of slow scanning and forward motion. They paused often. They listened. They watched. Even the young ones, with their playful curiosity, sensed when the adults became tense. Play ended quickly in those moments. Silence took over, Trees gave some safety, but even branches could not guarantee protection. Leopards sometimes climbed as well, moving among limbs with quiet precision. Lucy knew that resting high in the trees was safer than sleeping on the ground, yet she remained alert even there. The night air carried sounds differently, and every shift in the branches below could hold meaning. The constant threat shaped her body and her mind. It shaped her group too, encouraging them to stay close enough that many eyes could watch for danger. Protection came from being within reach of others. A startled cry from one could alert the rest. A sudden rush towards safety could save everyone if it happened quickly enough. This unending vigilance did not mean their days were filled with fear. It simply meant their senses were always open, attuned to the quiet language of the world. Even while eating, resting, or grooming, they listened. A sound that grew too loud or too sudden could prompt them to rise as one, the group's instinctive coordination acting as both shield and warning. The predators themselves moved with their own patterns. Crocodiles sensed the vibrations of approaching bodies. Saber-toothed cats waited for weaknesses or distractions. Hyenas patrolled the edges of the plains, searching for opportunities left behind by other hunters. To live among such creatures, Lucy's kind learned not only to avoid danger, but to anticipate it. They recognized the places where shadows lingered too long, the areas where certain smells meant recent activity, and the quiet patches where even insects grew cautious. There were moments when Lucy felt a shift in the air before anything else, a faint tremor through the ground, the sudden absence of nearby movement. These sensations reached her before her eyes confirmed the presence of danger. This early detection became one of her species' most valuable traits. Over time, the ability to sense the world with such precision helped build a foundation for future awareness. Their world did not offer safety, it offered only opportunity, risk, and the chance to move through each day by reading the land with care. Lucy survived not because she was stronger than the predators around her, but because she understood the rhythms of the place she lived in. Her instinct, shaped by countless generations before her, allowed her to navigate a landscape where the wind and a broken twig could mean everything. In Lucy's world, food was not gathered from baskets or stored for later use. It was discovered moment by moment, scattered across the landscape in small pockets that changed with the season. Her diet, revealed through the subtle clues preserved in fossilized teeth and ancient soil, paints a picture of a creature who knew how to survive on variety. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was guaranteed. The day's search for nourishment began in the gentle hours after dawn. The cool air carried scents that faded quickly once the sun rose higher, so Lucy used these early moments to sense where food might be hiding. The land offered soft fruits in certain seasons, their sweetness protected by leaves that gathered dew. Some fruits hung low enough to reach with little effort. Others required climbing, guiding her back into branches where she balanced with practiced ease. Seeds added richness to her diet. Some were found inside tough pods that had fallen during the night. Others clung to grasses that swayed in the breeze. She gathered them by pulling clusters of stems into her hands and stripping the seeds with quick, careful motions. These small, concentrated packets of energy helped sustain her during long walks when other food was scarce. Roots held another type of nourishment. Their taste varied, sometimes earthy and mild, sometimes sharp. Lucy learned to dig for them by watching older members of her group. With her fingers, she loosened the soil, feeling for the subtle firmness that hinted at something worth pulling. In times of drought, these buried stores of moisture became especially important. They held not only food but hints of water where little else remained. Insects provided crucial protein. They lived beneath bark, inside rotting logs, and under stones warmed by the sun. Lucy lifted these objects with care, listening for the faint sounds of movement beneath. Bees, termites, and beetles each required different approaches. Termites could be found inside mounds that stood like miniature towers across the plains. The taste may have been simple, but the nourishment was significant. When she found a rich source of insects, the group often gathered around her discovery, sharing the find in quiet cooperation. Eggs, when found, offered rare richness. Birds nested in branches that Lucy sometimes reached while climbing. She did not seek nests intentionally in the way future humans would, but she recognized opportunity when she encountered it. Eggs were delicate treasures, taken quickly before the parent returned. This was a world where every advantage mattered, and small sources of energy could shape the success of a day. Occasionally, Lucy's group found small animals slow enough or unaware enough to be captured. These moments were rare and required quick reflexes. Such prey might be a lizard basking on a warm rock or a young bird unable to fly far. These catches were shared not through deliberate generosity, but because the group's closeness made secrecy difficult. The act of eating near others naturally encouraged small gestures of distribution. Competition shaped all of these behaviors. The savannah was filled with other animals searching for the same resources. Birds swooped down to take fruit. Small mammals dug in the soil, often reaching roots before Lucy's group did. Insects themselves were part of the competition, consuming leaves or burrowing into resources that Lucy needed. Even large herbivores could alter the landscape, trampling plants or stripping branches bare, leaving fewer options behind. During periods of drought, competition sharpened further. Water sources shrank, and plants produced fewer fruits or flowers. Trees dropped their leaves early to conserve moisture. Insects retreated deeper underground. The sun pressed heavily onto the land, drawing the life from places that had once been rich with food. In such times, Lucy depended even more on memory, instinct, and creativity. She learned to explore areas she had overlooked before. She looked for signs of new growth beneath dying plants. She cracked open dry wood in search of hidden insect nests. In moments when the landscape felt barren, innovation became survival. This creative foraging became one of the earliest sparks of what would eventually grow into human ingenuity. Lucy did not use tools like her later descendants, yet she approached the world with a flexible mind. She recognized patterns, tested new possibilities, and adjusted her behavior based on what she observed. A fallen branch might suggest insects beneath it. A half-eaten fruit could reveal a tree worth climbing. A patch of disturbed soil might hint at roots below. Her teeth tell part of this story. Microscopic marks on their surfaces reveal a diet that shifted depending on the environment. Some periods show signs of chewing tougher materials. Others reveal softer foods consumed in abundance. These variations reflect Lucy's adaptability. She did not rely on a single food source. She survived by embracing the mosaic of resources her world offered. The tribe shared this approach. Moving with the group allowed them to discover more together than any individual could find alone. When one member located something edible, the others adjusted their movements. When food became scarce, they traveled farther. Their collective search created a kind of living web across the land, each member contributing knowledge without needing to speak it. This great African feast, scattered across the landscape and changing with the seasons, shaped Lucy's existence. It taught her patience, awareness, and flexibility. It encouraged curiosity in the young and reinforced cooperation within the group. The land did not provide easily, but it offered enough for those who learned its rhythms. Through this constant search for sustenance, Lucy carried forward a pattern that would echo through millions of years of evolution. The idea that survival rewards those who explore, adapt, and remain open to possibilities hidden in the world around them. Long before anyone found her resting beneath ancient layers of earth, Lucy lived through many quiet days marked by sun, wind, and the steady rhythm of her group. Yet her final moments, preserved only in the language of broken bone and mineral memory, speak of a sudden shift, a single instant when the world beneath her changed. Fossils rarely tell stories with clarity, but her remains offer hints, patterns, and shadows of an event that ended her life and, in an unexpected way, ensured that her story would echo through deep time. Her bones carry fractures that match the trauma of a fall from significant height. These breaks are not random. They appear in places that reflect the distribution of force when a body meets the ground with speed. Scientists have studied these fractures carefully, comparing them with injuries seen in modern primates who fall from trees. The similarities are striking. The angles, the crushing, the way certain bones shattered, all point to a moment when gravity pulled her from safety into sudden silence. What led to that fall remains hidden. The earth does not record intention, it records only the imprint of final outcomes. But nature allows us to imagine the possibilities through the clues she left behind. Perhaps she fell during sleep. Lucy and her kind often rested in trees at night, choosing branches that felt secure enough to hold them above the dangers of the ground. Even so, branches sometimes shift under unexpected weight. A sudden breeze might have unsettled her. A branch softened by age or insects might have cracked beneath her. If the night was cold, and her body curled tightly for warmth, a slight shift could have been enough to lose balance. In such darkness, even a careful sleeper might slip. Another possibility is that she fell while trying to escape danger. The world she lived in held predators who moved with quiet confidence. A sudden approach from below, a rustle in the grass, or a shape at the base of a tree could have startled her group into swift motion. In moments like these, instinct guided their limbs. They climbed quickly, sometimes too quickly, relying on branches that might not have been strong enough to hold the weight of a rushing body. A misjudged step or a desperate grip that failed could have sent her downward before she had time to correct her movement. There is also the question of whether she was alone. Her species rarely traveled without the presence of others. Even at night, individuals rested near one another. If she fell while the group slept, they might have awoken to the sound, their bodies trembling with confusion as they peered down into the shadows below. If she fell during the day, others might have watched helplessly, unable to intervene as gravity took hold. These small bands cared for one another, not through spoken promises, but through instinctive closeness. It is likely that those who shared her days were nearby when her life ended, unable to do anything but witness the moment that separated her from them. The impact of her fall was swift. Her injuries were severe, suggesting that the fall was the event that ended her life rather than a wound she carried afterward. There is no sign of healing in the fractures, no evidence that she lived beyond that moment. In a place filled with predators, a body unable to move quickly could not survive long. Whether she died instantly or shortly after, the world around her continued moving as it always had. The wind passed through the branches, the grass shifted, the insects resumed their songs. Her body came to rest, where time would eventually cover her with layers of silt and sediment. Rain washed soil into the place where she lay. Seasonal floods carried fine particles that settled gently over her bones. Volcanic ash, blown from distant mountains, added pale blankets that sealed her further. Years became centuries, then thousands of years, then millions. As the world changed, her body changed too. Minerals replaced what once had been living bone. Stone grew where tissue had been. Her form, once soft and warm with breath, became part of the earth itself. The irony of her story lies in this transformation. In life, she was one among many. an individual who navigated the land with instinct and awareness, who foraged, rested, and traveled with her group across the shifting savannah. She did not know she carried features that would one day help shape the history of an entire lineage. She did not know her steps marked an evolutionary path that stretched far into the future. Yet in death, she became singular. Her fall, tragic in its suddenness, placed her in the perfect conditions for preservation. Most creatures from her time vanished without trace, their remains scattered or consumed by the world's endless cycles. But she endured, not in life, but in stone. Her bones survived long enough to be uncovered by hands that would recognize their significance. The moment that ended her journey became the moment that secured her place in ours. Her fall carried her into memory, not through intention, but through the quiet work of time. And from that final instant, the story of Lucy began to rise again. After Lucy's final moment, the world around her did what it had always done. It continued. The wind carried seeds across the grasslands. Birds traced slow arcs through the sky. The insects resumed their steady murmurs. Her group moved on, guided by instinct and necessity, unaware that the place where she fell would someday become a window into deep time. Her body, left on the ground beneath branches that once sheltered her, began a transformation shaped not by intention, but by the ancient patience of the earth. Fossilization is rare. Most creatures vanish completely, their bones scattered, crushed, or consumed by the living soil. But the land where Lucy lived held geological conditions that, by chance alone, allowed her remains to slip from the cycle of decay into another kind of existence. A single storm may have been the first step. Rain could have washed loose sediment into the shallow depression where her body lay. Mud thickened around her frame, softening the outlines of her limbs. Insects and scavengers disturbed the surface, yet the weight of settling silt gradually covered her, layer by layer, pressing her gently into the ground. As days passed into weeks, and weeks became seasons, the soil around her shifted. Dust carried by wind settled lightly over her. Small floods brought new sediments that settled and hardened. The sun baked the earth, creating compact layers that protected what lay beneath. She slowly disappeared from the surface, not because she moved, but because the landscape moved around her. Mineral-rich water seeped into the soil, carrying dissolved elements that began to enter her bones. Her living tissues were long gone, but the structure they left behind remained, porous and receptive. The minerals found these tiny spaces and settled into them, crystal by crystal. Over time, they replaced the organic material with stone. This process, quiet and invisible, turned her skeleton from bone to mineral. It preserved the shape of her life, even as her body became part of the earth. The land around her was never still. Though the changes were slow, they were constant. The Rift Valley continued its long, patient widening. The ground stretched and shifted, creating cracks and fractures that altered the shape of the terrain. Volcanic mountains rose in the distance, exhaling ash that drifted through the air before settling into soft layers over the plains. Some of this ash may have fallen over the place where Lucy rested, adding a pale blanket that sealed her further from the surface. This volcanic dust, rich in minerals, became another layer in the long process that kept her remains hidden yet protected. Geological stillness does not mean inactivity. It means change unfolding at a pace too slow for living beings to sense. While Lucy's bones hardened into stone, the climate shifted. Seasons grew drier, then wetter, then dry again in cycles that repeated across millennia. Rivers carved new paths through the earth, lakes appeared and vanished. Forests retreated, replaced by grasslands that stretched for miles, only to be reshaped again by time. Millions of other creatures lived and died across these ages, yet their bodies left no trace. Their bones dissolved into the soil or were carried away by scavengers. Wind erased their footprints. Water scattered their remains until nothing recognizable remained. Fossilization required a rare harmony of factors, and Lucy happened to fall in a place where these conditions aligned. If she had died just a few meters away, in a different pocket of land, she might have been lost entirely. As the centuries folded into one another, her bones remained encased within the earth. The minerals binding them grew stronger. Pressure from layers above compacted the sediments around her, turning soft mud into hardened stone. The landscape rose and fell with slow breaths of geological time. Mountains lifted subtly in the distance. Earthquakes shifted the valley floor. Rain carved new channels into the land. Through all this, Lucy lay undisturbed, her form preserved within the silence of deep time. 3 million years passed. It is a span so vast that it stretches beyond the imagination of any living creature. During this time, species emerged, flourished, and disappeared. Entire ecosystems transformed. The sky above carried countless migratory paths. Seas shifted their edges. The very air changed its composition, and through it all, her bones remained where they had fallen, transformed from a living body into stone, holding the memory of a being who walked the earth long before words, fire, or tools existed. In this stillness, time did not erase her. It protected her. The earth slowly built a cradle of minerals around her, preserving the details of her anatomy with astonishing care. Her ribs, her jaw, her delicate hands became part of a geological archive, waiting for a moment far in the future when curious eyes and careful hands would uncover them again. When she finally returned to the surface, she emerged not as a living creature, but as a record, a message written in stone about who we were before we had names. Her transformation from life to fossil was not a disappearance, but a crossing. She became part of the Earth's memory, held gently through eons of silence until time itself delivered her back to the world of the living. Long after Lucy's bones settled into the slow silence of the earth, her kind continued to walk the shifting landscapes of East Africa. Their species, Australopithecus afarensis, lived for nearly 1 million years, an extraordinary stretch of time when measured against the fragile span of any single life. For generation after generation, they navigated the grasslands and scattered forests, carried their young, avoided danger, and adapted as the world around them changed. Their longevity speaks of resilience, patience, and a design well suited to the environment they inhabited. Yet even the strongest patterns eventually meet their limits. The world Lucy knew did not remain the same. The climate shifted in long cycles. Forests moved, shrinking in some regions and expanding in others. Rivers altered their paths, cutting new channels through the earth. The land itself changed underfoot, shaped by tectonic forces that lifted hills, opened valleys, and created subtle barriers that separated populations. Across these slow rearrangements, no species could stay fixed in time. Survival demanded flexibility, and while Australopithecus afarensis had many strengths, they also carried traits that could not adjust quickly enough to every new challenge. For a long while, they managed well. Their upright posture, curved fingers, and small but capable brains allowed them to thrive in an environment that demanded both caution and exploration. Their bodies blended old and new adaptations, shaped for climbing yet efficient on the ground. This duality gave them the ability to move through different habitats, finding resources others might overlook. Their diet was varied, their group life cooperative, and their instincts finely tuned. These qualities helped them endure far longer than many species before them. But evolution moves in subtle ways, often through small changes that accumulate across countless generations. Even as Lucy's kind lived and flourished, other hominins began to appear in nearby landscapes. Some carried traits that differed slightly from hers. Their jaws were shaped for chewing tougher foods. Their limbs held proportions better suited for long-distance travel. Their teeth showed new patterns of wear. Their brains, while still small, exhibited gradual increases in size and complexity. These differences were not dramatic at first, but they hinted at futures that Australopithecus afarensis could not follow. The environment played its role as well. As the climate grew more unpredictable, water sources shifted, and food became scattered across wider ranges. Species that could travel longer distances or adapt to tougher diets gained advantages. Those with broader behavioral flexibility found new ways to survive drought, competition, and the changing landscape. Over time, these small advantages shaped the direction of evolution. Australopithecus afarensis, though successful for so long, began to face challenges that their bodies and behaviors were not fully prepared to meet. Their disappearance was not sudden. It happened slowly, in the quiet pace of nature's transitions. There was no single moment when the last individual of the species walked the earth. Instead, their populations shrank gradually as other hominins grew more numerous. Their territories shifted, their presence faded. Some may have lived alongside emerging species for generations, sharing the same water sources and moving through the same grasslands. But as the centuries passed, the features that defined Lucy's kind became less common until they vanished entirely from the living world. Yet disappearance does not mean erasure. Evolution does not replace what came before, it builds upon it. Lucy's lineage left pieces of itself in the species that followed. Certain elements of their anatomy, once shaped by ancient landscapes, carried forward into new forms. The angle of the femur that helped her walk, the proportions of the pelvis that supported upright posture, the balance between hand agility and leg strength. These features, honed over long ages, became foundations upon which later hominins shaped their own paths. Other species inherited fragments of their behavior as well. The tendency to move in small social groups, the early forms of cooperation, the long dependence of infants on caregivers, the adaptability of diet. These patterns, rooted in Lucy's world, echoed through time, influencing the way later hominins learned, traveled, and survived. As new species emerged, each one carried traces of what came before. Some traits grew more defined, others faded. But the essence of upright walking, the shift toward broader ecological flexibility, and the beginnings of cooperative social life continued to ripple forward. These features shaped the early members of the genus Homo, who would eventually spread far beyond the savannas of Lucy's time. It is strange to imagine that a species could live nearly 1 million years and then disappear so completely from the living world. Yet, in another sense, Lucy's kind never fully vanished. Their story is written not only in fossils, but in the hidden architecture of later bodies. Their legacy lives in the way future hominins moved, rested, foraged, and cared for one another. Lucy's species did not survive forever, but their influence did. From their long span on the earth, they passed forward a blueprint shaped by endurance, adaptability, and quiet innovation. And long after the last of them walked the shifting grasslands, the echoes of their existence continued, carried in the bones and behaviors of the beings who followed. Long after Lucy's kind took their last steps across the grasslands, the land beneath their feet continued its slow and patient transformation. Africa shifted through cycles of climate that stretched across thousands of years, each one reshaping the places where life could flourish. These changes unfolded so gradually that no creature living at the time could sense their direction, yet they shaped the future with steady certainty. The air grew drier in many regions. Rains that once arrived in predictable patterns began to falter, coming later in the season or not at all. Lakes shrank, leaving behind cracked earth that glittered in the sun. Rivers narrowed, carving new paths or disappearing entirely during especially harsh years. Forests, which once formed comforting pockets across the landscape, began to retreat, thinning at their edges. Trees that had sheltered Lucy's ancestors slowly lost ground to the expanding savannah. Across this widening plain, grasses took hold. They stretched in long, rippling waves that caught the wind and carried the rustling sound of an open world. This new landscape offered vast visibility, but its openness also demanded new kinds of survival. There were fewer branches to climb, for safety, and fewer shaded groves where small groups could rest unnoticed. Every journey across this land required endurance and a sharper awareness of distance. These environmental shifts placed pressure on every species that lived there. Animals that depended on dense forests struggled as their habitats fragmented. Many disappeared, leaving spaces in the ecosystem that other species would eventually fill. This slow dance of extinction and emergence repeated over and over, with each cycle nudging life toward different solutions. Among the beings shaped by these changes were the early hominins who came after Lucy's kind. They inherited parts of her blueprint, but they also developed new traits in response to the expanding savannah. Their bodies grew taller, their strides longer. Their joints and muscles adapted to traveling farther across open ground in search of food and water. Some species developed broader chests and stronger legs, giving them the endurance needed for long-distance movement under the relentless sun. Their minds changed as well. The shifting landscape required new forms of problem-solving. Food sources became more diverse, but also more challenging to access. This led to experiments in behavior that slowly shaped cognition. Early hominins began to recognize patterns in a more complex way. They remembered where certain plants grew during dry months. They learned which stones were easier to shape into simple tools. Over time, these experiments accumulated. Simple tools began to appear, shaped by hands that had not yet mastered fine craftsmanship, but understood that stone could extend the reach of the body. A sharp flake could open a nut that would otherwise remain sealed. A pointed edge could cut through tough roots. These early tools were rudimentary, yet they marked a turning point. They represented a new relationship with the world, one where the environment was not just navigated but manipulated. New species emerged, carrying these innovations forward. Some had slightly larger brains, allowing for more complex communication and planning. Others developed wider ranges, traveling into regions that Lucy's kind never reached. These hominins spread across new territories, exploring grasslands, woodlands, and riversides with curiosity shaped by necessity. Each generation refined the strategies learned by the one before. As the world changed, Lucy's world became a memory held only in the stones beneath the soil. The forests she once knew dwindled. The patterns of life that shaped her days faded into extinction. The predators she feared shifted in population or vanished. The plants she foraged moved into new seasons of growth, adapting to the changing climate or giving way to species better suited for the new conditions. Yet her influence did not disappear. It lived quietly in the bodies of the hominins who followed. Every step they took across the savannah carried the legacy of Lucy's upright posture. Every instinct to stay close to others, to raise young in groups, and to read the landscape with careful eyes echoed the patterns that had shaped Lucy's days. Her blueprint persisted, not as a rigid design, but as a gentle thread woven into the fabric of evolution. Even as new species emerged, the memory of what came before lingered in the architecture of bone and thought. The angle of a femur, the curve of a spine, the grip of a hand still capable of climbing, all whispered of the ancestors who once lived between branches and earth. These subtle echoes guided future generations in ways they could not have understood. They carried Lucy's world forward in pieces. Even as the land itself changed beyond recognition, Africa continued to evolve. The savannah grew, broader. The climate oscillated between wet and dry periods. New challenges emerged, and with them new adaptations. Through all of this, Lucy's lineage became part of a larger story, one that stretched beyond her species and into the unfolding tapestry of hominin evolution. Her world did not end suddenly. It drifted into the past, with each passing millennium, softened by time until it became part of the deep history written in fossils, soil, and stone. Yet the echoes of her existence endured, carried by the beings who inherited fragments of her design and built upon them. The world moved on, reshaping itself again and again, but the quiet legacy of Lucy remained, guiding the creatures who came after her into futures she could never have seen. After Lucy's final breath, after the last vibrations of her fall faded into the grasses and the wind moved on as if nothing had happened, the world began the long work of forgetting. It did not happen quickly. Forgetting is not a single event. It is a slow drift, a layering of moments, a quiet swallowing of memory by soil, weather, and time. 3 million years stretched before her like an ocean of silence. No eyes looked upon her. No living creature knew that her bones, once warm with movement, rested beneath the earth. The place where she lay changed again and again, obscuring the small story she carried within her frame. Rain fell in cycles that lasted centuries. In some ages, storms were heavy, carving new paths across the land and washing fine silt into the low places. In other ages, rain grew scarce and the soil cracked with thirst. Each shift brought a new layer of sediment that drifted gently over her bones, pressing them deeper into the quiet ground. These layers were not deliberate. They were simply the natural breath of an ancient landscape. Ash arrived too. Volcanoes in East Africa exhaled clouds of pale dust that settled over vast distances. Some eruptions were small, leaving thin blankets across the valley. Others were powerful, spreading ash that darkened the sky and drifted downward for days. This ash sealed what lay below, capturing fragments of the world in thin, delicate sheets. Over time, these layers created a record of climate, life, and geological change. Lucy became one layer among many, her presence buried quietly beneath the stories of the earth. As the millennia gathered, roots grew above her resting place. Plants rose and withered. Trees appeared in some ages and vanished in others. Animals walked across the ground above her, unaware of the skeleton beneath their feet. The land lived its own life, one that continued without interruption. Lucy's world, the one she had known intimately, dissolved into deep time. Her group, her kin, her species, all drifted into extinction, leaving no living memory of their presence. The earth, in its way, forgot her, not through intention, but through the vastness of time itself. Each layer of sediment, each shift in climate, each tremor of the Rift Valley slowly erased the traces of her existence. Her bones hardened into stone, their organic material replaced by minerals carried through underground water. The living body she once had vanished completely, replaced by a fossil that held the shape of who she had been. Time acted as both destroyer and protector. It stripped her of all the softness she once carried, the flesh that moved, the breath that warmed her chest, the footsteps she left behind. Yet it also guarded her. The layers of ash and sediment that hid her from the world preserved her from the forces that would have scattered or consumed her remains. The earth closed around her in a way that kept her whole enough to be recognized millions of years later. Above her, the world changed again and again. Mountains rose in slow, patient arcs, valleys widened, rivers formed, then dried, then carved new shapes into the land. The sky shifted through ages of heat and cold. Entire ecosystems came and went. The great cycles of climate rewrote the African continent more times than any mind can fully imagine. Throughout all of this, Lucy's fossil lay undisturbed in its cradle of stone. There was a time, long before modern humans emerged, when her bones were already ancient. Even the earliest members of the genus Homo walked the earth without any knowledge that beneath the soil lay one of their distant relatives. Generations of hominins passed, each one shaped by forces that Lucy's kind had felt in softer, earlier forms. Still, none of them knew her name, her story, or the shape of her bones. The silence continued. It was not cold or cruel. It was simply the natural stillness of deep time, a silence that holds everything and remembers nothing until something disturbs it. When humans finally appeared, with their growing curiosity and their hands shaped for careful exploration, the earth was still quiet. Her bones remained hidden beneath layers that had settled and hardened over millions of years. But curiosity has a way of stirring the ground. It digs gently, it brushes dust away, it lifts old stories back into the light. 3 million years after her fall, the silence broke, not through sound, but through recognition. A fragment of bone surfaced, then another, then another. The earth that had spent ages forgetting began, in that moment, to reveal what it had protected. Science gave Lucy back her name, not the name her kind would have used, but one that carried her into memory again. Time had erased her life and preserved it in equal measure, holding her in darkness until the world was ready to understand who she was. For 3 million years, Lucy's bones rested in silence. The world above her changed again and again, yet nothing disturbed the quiet cradle of sediment that held her. Then, in the dry season of 1974, a group of scientists walked across the same landscape where she had once taken her final steps. They did not know that beneath their feet lay a story waiting to rise into the light. The team was led by a young paleoanthropologist named Donald Johansen. He and his colleagues had come to a place called Hadar, a stretch of Ethiopian desert shaped by sun, time, and shifting geology. The land looked empty to the untrained eye, but they understood that this emptiness was an illusion. The soil here held fragments of deep history. Bones, teeth, and stone remnants lay hidden beneath hardened surfaces and scattered gravel. If anything survived from the ancient past, it was likely to be found in valleys like this one. The days were long and hot. Each morning the sun climbed, quickly, baking the earth and drawing shimmering heat from the ground. Dust clung to clothing and hair, making every movement feel heavy, yet the team worked with steady determination. They walked slowly across the terrain, scanning the ground for small shapes that did not match the surrounding stone. A hint of curve, a flash of smooth surface, a line too clean to be random. These were signs that the earth might be holding on to something old. On the 30th of November, the morning began as many others had. The air was dry, the sky a pale and cloudless blue. Johansen and his graduate student, Tom Gray, decided to survey a site they had passed before. It was not a place they expected much from. The landscape looked quiet and unremarkable, a patch of eroded sediments and broken fragments. Yet something drew them back there, a sense that the land might still have secrets left untouched. As they walked, Johansen noticed a small bone lying near his feet. It was a fragment, but it caught his attention. He picked it up, turning it gently in his hand. Then another fragment appeared a few steps away, and another. A trail of scattered pieces stretched across the ground, like a whisper that had waited for someone patient enough to listen. They began marking the fragments, placing flags in the dirt to track where each one had fallen. With each new discovery, their steps grew slower, more focused. At some point, the trail led them to a larger piece. It was unmistakable, a part of a human-like skeleton that looked far older than any they had seen before. The shape, the size, the thickness of the bone all hinted at something extraordinary. As they collected more fragments, the realization dawned on them gently. Then, all at once, they were not uncovering a few isolated bones. They were finding nearly an entire skeleton, a single individual who had lived millions of years before modern humans took shape. Word spread quickly through the camp. Scientists emerged from their tents and vehicles, gathering around the growing pile of fossil fragments with wide eyes, the air filled with a mix of disbelief and quiet excitement. They knelt in the dirt, studying each piece with careful hands, whispering observations and questions that tumbled over one another. The emotional weight of the discovery settled over them slowly, like the evening light softening the horizon. Laughter broke through the tension, light and incredulous. Some stared in silence, trying to understand the magnitude of what lay before them. Others paced around the site, unable to sit still, caught between joy and awe. That night, they played music in the camp as they examined the pieces beneath lantern light. A small radio buzzed with familiar tunes drifting across the desert air. One song played repeatedly, its melody weaving into the moment as naturally as breath, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It floated softly over the fossil fragments, over the minds trying to grasp the importance of what they had found. The name settled easily, not as a scientific label, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the wonder she had brought into their lives. They called her Lucy. She became far more than a skeleton. She became a symbol of the deep past that lived within every human body. Her bones told a story that stretched far beyond what anyone had imagined. Before her discovery, many believed that the human lineage was younger, simpler, and more straightforward. Lucy revealed something different. She showed that our roots reached deeper into time, branching in ways that reshaped every assumption. As the team worked into the night, carefully laying out each piece of her frame, they understood that the world would never look at human origins the same way again. Lucy had returned from the long silence of the earth, carrying a message older than memory. Through her, the human story expanded, deepened, and opened into the ancient chapters that had long remained hidden. And on that quiet night in 1974, under the soft glow of lanterns and distant stars, the desert finally gave her back. When Lucy's bones were first laid out on tables under the soft light of the research tent, no one yet understood just how deeply she would shift the foundations of science. The excitement of discovery still clung to the team, but the meaning of the skeleton before them unfolded slowly, like a story spoken in pieces. Each bone offered a sentence, each joint offered a clue. Together, they formed a message that would ripple across the fields of anthropology, biology, and human history. Before Lucy, the scientific world held a clear and confident belief about human evolution. The story seemed simple. For generations, textbooks taught that the defining trait of humanity was intelligence. Big brains came first. Walking upright, tool-making, and other behaviors were thought to emerge later as consequences of growing intellect. This idea shaped how researchers searched for fossils, how they interpreted fragments of bone, and how they imagined the earliest chapters of the human story. Lucy changed this quietly but completely. Her skull, delicate and small, told one part of the story. It held a brain not much larger than that of a modern chimpanzee. Yet the way her spine met the base of her skull revealed that she carried her head above her body in a vertical posture. Her pelvis, wide and uniquely shaped, showed adaptations designed for upright walking. Her femur angled inward in a way that allowed her knees to support her weight during each step. The bones of her feet and ankles held the imprint of a creature who spent most of her time walking on two legs. This combination did not match the old story. Her body insisted on a different truth. She was a biped with a small brain, not a large-brained creature learning to walk. The order of evolution needed to be rewritten. The first scientists who studied her felt this shift like the distant tremor of an approaching change. They examined her pelvis again, as if a second look might reveal another explanation. They inspected the curves of her spinal vertebrae, searching for inconsistencies. They measured the angle of her thigh bone with careful precision. Every detail confirmed the same answer. Lucy walked upright long before the expansion of the human brain. This realization moved through the scientific community with a mix of surprise, resistance, and awe. Old ideas, firmly held, rarely fall quickly. Yet Lucy's anatomy spoke with such clarity that the shift became impossible to ignore. Conferences buzzed with discussion. Lectures changed their tone. Textbooks were rewritten. Students who had been taught one version of human evolution were suddenly asked to consider another. The field of paleoanthropology entered a new era as researchers began to view bipedalism not as a later adaptation, but as the earliest major step toward becoming human. This idea, called the bipedal first theory, suggested that the path of evolution was shaped by walking long before it was shaped by thinking. Upright movement opened new possibilities. It altered how early hominins traveled, how they gathered food, and how they interacted with their environment. It freed their hands for carrying, climbing, or gathering. It changed their perspective, allowing them to see across tall grasses and through the openings of a shifting landscape. Lucy stood at the center of this transformation. Her skeleton became evidence strong enough to change not only ideas, but the direction of entire research programs. Scientists began to search differently. They looked for fossils with a new eye, paying closer attention to hips, knees, ankles, and feet. They questioned assumptions about intelligence and culture. They analyzed footprints, tools, and ancient sediments with fresh curiosity. What had once seemed minor details became essential clues. Her discovery also encouraged more exploration in East Africa, where geological layers and volcanic deposits preserved time with unusual clarity. Expeditions multiplied. New fossils emerged in places once overlooked. Many of these finds echoed Lucy's pattern of small brains paired with upright walking. Each new discovery strengthened the shift she had begun, adding depth and nuance to the evolving picture. In this way, Lucy launched a scientific earthquake. She did not simply fill a gap in the fossil record. She reshaped the framework around that gap. She changed the questions scientists asked and the methods they used to seek answers. She revealed that evolution is not a straight line guided by intelligence, but a branching process shaped by environment, movement, and adaptation. Her skeleton, once buried in quiet earth, became a landmark that anchored the beginnings of modern paleoanthropology. Researchers no longer imagined early hominins as miniature versions of modern humans with growing brains. Instead, they understood them as creatures shaped primarily by their relationship to the land beneath their feet. The story became broader, richer, and more connected to the slow changes of climate and landscape. Lucy's impact continues. Every new fossil found is compared against the lessons she taught. Every debate about human origins carries her imprint. Her presence, silent and unmoving, altered the trajectory of scientific understanding in a way that few discoveries ever do. From a handful of bones found beneath an Ethiopian sky, an entire field shifted, and in that shift, the human story deepened, revealing that our earliest step was not taken in thought, but in motion. Once Lucy stepped back into the world through the hands that uncovered her. She did more than reshape scientific knowledge. She stirred questions that have drifted through laboratories, lecture halls, and quiet conversations ever since. Her bones, arranged carefully on museum tables and studied by generations of researchers, offer many answers. Yet they also hold mysteries that science still cannot unravel completely. These open spaces in her story keep her alive in our curiosity, inviting questions that echo across centuries. One of the most enduring questions is simple yet profound. Was Lucy a direct ancestor of humans? Her body suggests that she carried traits that shaped later hominins, especially in the way she walked. Her pelvis and legs reveal a confident biped capable of traveling long distances across the savannah. Her posture hints at changes that would eventually support tool use, communication, and new patterns of movement. Yet evolution rarely follows a straight line. It branches, narrows, and widens again, leaving behind a network of paths rather than a single trail. Many scientists believe that Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis, stands somewhere along the line that leads to modern humans. Others argue that she may have been a close relative rather than a direct ancestor, a member of a branch that contributed ideas to evolution but did not continue forward itself. Fossils discovered after her have added both clarity and confusion. Some resemble her closely. Others belong to separate species that lived at the same time, each carrying a different version of what our early ancestors could have been. The truth may lie somewhere in between. She might be one of many ancestors whose genetic contributions blended across millennia, or she may represent a path that led to others who carried humanity's future more directly. Her bones cannot answer this with final certainty. They speak of possibility rather than closure, and in that possibility, she remains both familiar and mysterious. Another question lingers in the shadows of paleoanthropology. How intelligent was she really? Her brain was small, closer in size to that of modern apes than to ours. Yet brain size alone does not reveal the depth of a mind. The structure of her skull suggests an organism capable of complex perception, social understanding, and environmental awareness. Her lifestyle demanded memory, cooperation, and emotional sensitivity. She recognized patterns in the landscape, remembered safe paths, and understood the subtle cues that kept her group alive. Intelligence, in her world, was woven into instinct. She did not reflect on the future as humans do, and she likely did not imagine possibilities beyond the present moment. Her intelligence was a balance of memory, perception, and reaction, formed by millions of years of adaptation. She understood danger before she understood safety. She knew how to find food in a changing landscape. She felt the importance of the group and responded to the emotions of others without needing words. Whether this counts as intelligence in the human sense remains part of the ongoing debate. Some researchers see in her the early sparks of cognitive expansion. Others believe her mind was shaped entirely by instinctive patterns, not by any form of conscious thought. The answer may be hidden in neural pathways long dissolved, leaving behind only the traces of behavior preserved in bones and ancient footprints. A third question stretches across time like a thin thread. Did her species use tools? For many years, scientists assumed that Lucy's kind lived before tool use began. The earliest known stone tools were associated with later species of the genus Homo. Yet discoveries in recent years have complicated this assumption. Stones found with markings that suggest deliberate shaping appear near sites dated close to her era. Some researchers suggest that Australopithecus afarensis may have used simple tools made of stone or bone, even if they were not crafted with the precision seen later. Even without shaped tools, Lucy may have used objects found in nature. A sharp rock could open a seed pod. A stick could probe into a rotting log. These actions do not leave clear archaeological traces, yet they represent meaningful steps in cognitive development. Whether her species engaged in such behavior is still debated, and fossils alone cannot resolve it fully. The answer remains suspended between possibility and evidence, waiting for new discoveries to fill in the gaps. These questions persist not because science has failed, but because Lucy lived in a time where so much has vanished. Bones can reveal posture, diet, age, and movement, but they preserve only faint echoes of behavior, thought, and social complexity. Every fossil uncovered deepens our understanding while opening new spaces for speculation. Each discovery becomes another part of a puzzle with pieces missing, scattered, or changed by time. And so Lucy continues to provoke curiosity. She stands at a crossroads in human history, her presence both fragile and influential. Her bones are silent, but not mute. They whisper of an ancient world, of decisions made without language, of a lineage uncertain yet full of potential. They invite new generations of researchers to kneel beside dusty excavations, to brush away grains of time, and to listen. The questions she left behind are not frustrations, they are invitations. They remind us that science is not only about answers, it is also about wonder, patience, and the gentle pursuit of understanding. And through these questions, Lucy's story continues to unfold, shaped not only by what we know, but by what we are still learning to see. When scientists first leaned over Lucy's small frame, they were not only looking at bones, they were looking at a record keeper, a quiet archivist who had carried the history of her life within her body, storing evidence in places so small that only careful eyes and patient hands could uncover it. Her skeleton, scattered in the soil for more than 3 million years, became a library of details waiting to be read. Every joint, every ridge, every groove held information about how she moved, how she fed, how she grew, and how she lived in a world that no longer exists. Her bones did not speak in words. They spoke in tiny scratches, smooth surfaces, worn edges, and faint mineral traces. These markings, subtle and silent, revealed patterns of muscle use, posture, and daily activity. The surface of her joints, viewed under magnification, showed where cartilage had once pressed and slid during each step she took. The shapes and thicknesses of her bones hinted at which muscles had been strong, which movements had been common, and which behaviors defined her life. Her femur carried evidence of a body that balanced over 2 legs for long journeys across uneven ground. The wear on her hip socket suggested a rhythm of steady walking, not the knuckle-supported gait of an ape. The curve of her spine revealed how her torso aligned to keep her center of gravity stable. Even the small bones of her ankles carried traces of repeated steps, each one a faint echo of the countless paths she followed through forests and open grasslands. Her hands told another story. The joints in her fingers had markings that revealed a life of climbing and gripping. She may have slept in trees or escaped danger by scrambling upward into branches. Her fingers curved naturally inward, shaped by generations of ancestors who depended on the safety and perspective that higher ground provided. These details, preserved through time, blended ground and canopy into a single life, reminding us of her place between 2 worlds. Her teeth were among the most revealing parts of her skeleton. Tooth enamel forms slowly and does not regenerate, which means it keeps a record of life's challenges. Under magnification, the enamel displayed tiny growth lines, similar to the rings of a tree. These lines showed periods of steady nutrition and moments of stress, perhaps during droughts or seasonal scarcity. The patterns in her enamel whispered of good years, lean years, and sudden changes in the climate around her. Microscopic scratches on the surfaces of her molars carried traces of her diet. Some scratches were fine and straight, shaped by chewing soft fruits and tender leaves. Others were deeper and more irregular, created when she crushed seeds or grit-coated roots. These marks, preserved for millions of years, revealed not only what she ate, but also the conditions of the landscape. If dust had been thick in the air, or if food had grown close to dry soil, the grit that clung to plants left its signature on her teeth. The chemical composition of her enamel offered another layer of insight. Subtle differences in elements like carbon and oxygen reflected the plants available in her environment. They hinted at shifting climates, wet seasons followed by dry ones, and the vegetation that changed as the landscape transformed under the rising and falling rhythms of ancient rain. Even broken fragments of her bones offered clues. The thickness of her ribs, the angles of her joints, and the compactness of her vertebrae all worked together like pieces of a complex puzzle. These pieces helped scientists reconstruct not just how she looked, but how she lived. They showed the strength of her upper body, the flexibility of her lower limbs, and the balance of a creature that stood upright, yet still carried the instincts of an earlier time. Her bones were also windows into her final moments. Tiny fractures, preserved in mineral form, lined her skeleton in patterns that suggested a single great fall. These breaks appeared before fossilization, meaning they happened while she was alive or just after her death, not long after her last breath. This tragic moment, marked by fractures too coordinated to be chance, offered a glimpse of the event that ended her life and allowed her body to rest in the sediments that would preserve her story. Yet beyond all scientific detail, her bones held something quieter and more personal. They carried the weight of her existence, the shape of her presence in a world lost to time. They revealed her as an active being who navigated danger, nurtured social bonds, and explored her surroundings with instinctive awareness. Her skeleton became not only a document of data, but an emotional relic, a reminder that history is made of lives lived in motion, not only of facts written in books. In the curves of her bones, there is the memory of her stride. In the wear of her teeth, there is the memory of the plants she tasted. In the scars of her fractures, there is the shadow of her final fall. And in all these details, held across 3 million years, there is the trace of a world that once breathed around her, and a life that once quietly shaped the story that would one day become our own. Long after Lucy's time, when researchers began piecing together the wider story of human evolution, they discovered something unexpected. She had not walked through an empty world where one species neatly followed another. Instead, she lived among a gathering of relatives, each shaped by different pressures, different landscapes, and different experiments of nature. The ancient world was not a straight line of ancestors leading toward us. It was a branching grove filled with species that flourished for a while, then vanished, leaving behind fossils that whisper of possibilities that never fully bloomed. These were Lucy's cousins. Some were older, some younger, some fierce-looking, some gentle in appearance, but all of them were part of a wider family that once moved together across the shifting plains of Africa. One of these cousins belonged to a group known as Paranthropus, a lineage that took a very different path. Their skulls were larger and sturdier, shaped by powerful, chewing muscles that stretched from jaw to crest. The top of their heads carried a bony ridge where thick muscle anchored, giving them strength to grind tough roots and fibrous plants. Their jaws were wide, their molars large and flat, built for a diet that demanded constant grinding. These creatures lived in landscapes where survival meant finding food that others could not easily digest. Instead of walking further or adapting to varied diets, they doubled down on their ability to chew. Their bodies told a story of specialization, a path that thrived for a time before the climate shifted again. Another cousin, known as Kenyanthropus, appeared in a different region. Fossils found near Lake Turkana revealed a face that was flatter and more modern-looking than Lucy's. The structure of the skull suggested a creature with a varied diet, perhaps one that found opportunity in environments that changed quickly. Kenyanthropus lived during a time when landscapes were shifting, lakes rose and fell, and weather patterns changed with surprising speed. A species able to adapt quickly had a chance to flourish, even if only for a short chapter in Earth's long history. Early members of the genus Homo also began to appear around this time. Some were small bodied, with brains only slightly larger than Lucy's. Others showed the first hints of tool shaping. They carried stones that bore marks of deliberate strikes, edges sharp enough to cut meat or scrape bark. These early humans did not yet resemble the later species that would travel out of Africa, but they carried sparks of innovation that hinted at futures still far away. Their minds, though still simple compared to ours, held the seeds of creativity. As these species lived side by side, they did not replace each other in any strict order. They overlapped, shared spaces, competed for food, and occasionally occupied different ecological niches within the same landscape. The world was not quiet or linear. It was full of competing strategies. Some species grew robust jaws, others crafted sharp flakes. Some walked long distances with energy-efficient strides. Others stayed close to dense forests where fruit and shelter were easier to find. Scientists once imagined a single ladder of ancestors leading from ape to human, each rung replaced by a more advanced form. But the fossil record tells a very different story. It shows a crowded tree of branches that split and rejoined, flourished and broke, curved upward or ended abruptly. Each branch represents an experiment in survival, shaped by climate, landscape, and chance. Lucy's species existed alongside some of these cousins for thousands of years. They likely crossed paths at watering holes or in open clearings. They may have watched each other from a distance, each group wary of strangers who looked familiar yet not entirely the same. There is no evidence of cooperation or conflict, only the quiet possibility that they shared the same horizon, the same wind, the same shifting patterns of survival. The presence of so many related species reminds us that humanity was never inevitable. We are only one outcome among many. For every ancestor that contributed to our existence, there were others who disappeared, leaving no descendants behind. Their stories ended long before ours began, yet their lives enriched the world in ways we still study today. Lucy stands among these cousins not as a solitary figure, but as one voice in a vanished choir. The echoes of that choir reach through time, revealing a world where evolution did not move with purpose or direction, but with a quiet, constant exploration of possibilities. Her bones, delicate and incomplete, form only one part of a vast tapestry. In imagining her place among these cousins, we see how each species filled a role in the ancient world. Some lived on grassy plains, some in wooded valleys, some near lakes that dried and returned with the seasons. Their differences reflect the many ways that life responds to challenge. Their similarities remind us of the shared roots of our lineage, and so the world around Lucy becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes a network of relatives, each shaped by forces larger than themselves. Together, they form a living constellation of early humanity, a reminder that our origins were not a single line drawn through time, but a chorus of voices, each adding its own note to the long story of evolution. Long after Lucy's bones settled into silence and her world faded into dust, the marks she left upon our lineage continued to move forward. Her body, shaped by landscapes that no longer exist, carried adaptations that traveled through generations until they reached us. These traits, simple in appearance yet profound in consequence, formed an invisible thread that stretches across 3 million years, weaving her life into ours. One piece of this thread lies in the way she stood. Her upright posture, supported by the curve of her spine and the structure of her hips and knees, changed how her species moved through the world. Walking on two legs freed her hands, but it did something deeper as well. It transformed how early hominins saw their surroundings. It lifted their gaze above grasses that once hid predators. It opened the horizon, offering glimpses of distant shapes, new paths, and subtle traces of weather. This shift in perspective reshaped perception itself. The way we stand, today, the ease with which we balance on 2 feet, echoes the mechanics that shaped her movements. Our bodies carry the same gentle tilt of the pelvis, the same inward angle of the femur, the same shaped spine that cushions each step. Even now, with shoes beneath our soles and cities beneath our strides, that ancient rhythm survives. It is part of our structure, held quietly in bone and muscle. Another strand in this thread runs through childhood. Lucy's species carried infants for long periods, nurturing them with care that required patience and cooperation. Their young developed slowly, depending on the group to survive. This long childhood created time for learning, time for social bonds to deepen, and time for emotions to grow more layered. Though Lucy never spoke a word, the tenderness required to protect her young fostered the earliest forms of connection. Her lineage leaned on the comfort of shared responsibility, passing protection from mother to group, from group to generation. We still carry this legacy. Human childhood stretches far beyond what survival demands. We grow slowly, learn gradually, and rely on our communities for many years. We form bonds that are not only practical but emotional. That sense of connection, born in small groups that watched over one another beneath ancient trees and open skies, remains a defining part of who we are. Cooperation formed another piece of this invisible thread. Lucy lived in a world where danger was constant, and no individual could face it alone. Her species listened for warning calls, shared food, and stayed close as they moved through uncertain territory. These acts were not yet built upon language or culture. They arose from instinct, shaped by the pressure of survival. In their cooperation, something remarkable began. They created a foundation on which future social complexity could grow. This early need to depend on one another can still be felt in our behavior, even in modern environments filled with technology and distant horizons. We seek companionship. We build families, communities, and ties that go beyond mere survival. The roots of our togetherness trace back to ancestors who needed one another not only for protection, but for comfort and recognition. Lucy's world required that life be lived together, not apart, and that truth endures in us. Many of the adaptations she carried, though subtle, shaped what came after. The structure of her pelvis influenced how birth evolved. The length of her legs guided how future species moved across expanding landscapes. Her diet, varied and flexible, hinted at the curiosity that would eventually lead our species to test new foods, new environments, and new ways of living. Even the tension between life on the ground and the safety of trees reflected a mind capable of navigating multiple environments at once, a delicate skill that would later allow humans to cross deserts, climb mountains, and sail across open seas. The invisible thread that connects us to Lucy is not a single trait, but a tapestry of small beginnings. It lives in the way we step forward, in the way we protect our young, in the way we gather with others for safety or comfort. It lives in the structure of our bones and in our instinctive pull toward community. It survives in our curiosity and in our ability to adapt to changing worlds. When we picture her walking through the ancient Rift Valley, moving between patches of shade or scanning the horizon for danger, we see a life that feels distant, yet the echoes of her steps remain within us, as steady and quiet as a heartbeat. Her choices were shaped by a world filled with predators and shifting climates, yet those same choices nudged evolution forward in ways she could never have understood. We inherit her gait each time we stand. We inherit her social instincts each time we reach for another hand. We inherit her patience each time we wait for a child to grow. And in these small actions, Lucy's presence lingers. The thread that binds her life to ours is delicate yet strong, stretched between ancient branches and modern skylines, held together by the quiet persistence of adaptation. It reminds us that we do not walk alone. We walk in the footprints of countless ancestors who shaped the path long before we were born. Their stories carried forward in bone, movement, memory, and the gentle unfolding of life across time. When Lucy was first introduced to the world, she did not arrive with the force of a discovery meant for headlines. She arrived quietly, through photographs and diagrams, through careful descriptions in journals and soft-spoken interviews, yet her presence struck something deep within the human story. She was small and ancient, a being from a world that no longer breathed, but as people looked at her, many felt a strange sense of familiarity. It was as if time bent for a moment, bringing the distant past close enough to touch. Scientists had already spent months studying her, measuring each bone, mapping each curve. They knew she would challenge long-held ideas. But outside the quiet circle of research tents and laboratories, the world was not prepared for the ripple she would create. When news of her discovery spread, curiosity grew quickly. People wanted to see her. They wanted to understand her. They wanted to know what she meant for the story of human origins. When the first images reached the public, reactions came in waves. Some felt awe, stirred by the idea that a creature so small and ancient could reveal so much about where humanity began. The thought that her footsteps echoed faintly into the present day made them pause. They saw her delicate bones and imagined a life lived under different stars, on land untouched by cities, in a world shaped by instinct and survival. These people welcomed her as a part of the family tree, a reminder that humanity had once been young, but others felt something closer to discomfort. Lucy's form did not resemble the heroic images often painted in stories of early humans. She was not tall or powerful. Her brain was small. Her proportions were unfamiliar. The thought that such a creature might be connected to modern humanity created resistance. Some feared what she represented. The idea of descent from ancient ape-like ancestors challenged traditions, scriptures, and cultural beliefs that had shaped identities for generations. For many, Lucy brought questions that touched not only science, but faith, memory, and meaning. Debates grew. Religious leaders discussed her in sermons and writings. Classroom teachers faced questions they had not expected. Families spoke about her around dinner tables, some with excitement, others with hesitation. People asked where the line between human and not human should be drawn, and whether that line was as clear as once believed. Lucy's small skeleton had become a symbol around which ideas collided, softened, or shifted. In some places, her discovery sparked fear that science was reaching too far into questions meant to remain mysterious. In others, she inspired a sense of connection to the wider tapestry of life on Earth. She stood at the crossroads of belief and knowledge, reminding people that the story of human origins was not simple, and that identity could stretch deeper into time than many had imagined. Yet beneath the debates, something more subtle happened. People began to see parts of themselves in her. They noticed the curve of her pelvis and recognized the first hints of a posture they shared. They saw the shape of her hands and the possibility of gestures that resembled their own. They saw a being who moved through her world with awareness, caution, and social bonds, not unlike the patterns that still guide human life. Even those who questioned her place in human ancestry felt the pull of curiosity. Lucy's existence asked a quiet question. What does it mean to be human, and when did that meaning begin? She did not answer the question directly. She simply stood as a reminder that humanity was shaped over long ages, through countless challenges, and through the persistence of many species whose names are lost. Museums placed her reconstructed form on display, and visitors stood before her, often in silence. Some stared at her face, reconstructed by artists from bone and imagination, trying to imagine her world. Others looked at the smallness of her frame and felt the enormity of the time she represented. Children pressed their hands to the glass, sensing that she was both familiar and distant. Adults lingered longer, trying to understand the connection that seemed to reach across millions of years. Lucy became a mirror, not in the sense of physical resemblance, but in the quiet recognition she stirred. She showed that identity is layered, built from moments of adaptation, survival, and change. She revealed that the story of humanity is not fixed, but dynamic, shaped by ancient relatives who once faced the same sun, felt the same wind, and navigated the same uncertainties of life. In the reflections cast by her bones, people saw the fragility and resilience that define the human journey. They saw the mystery of origins. They saw the long, slow unfolding of traits that would one day shape civilizations. And they sensed, perhaps for the first time, that understanding the past does not diminish who we are, but deepens the roots from which we grow. Through all the reactions, all the debates, and all the quiet moments spent gazing at her remains, Lucy became more than a fossil. She became a reminder that the human story extends far beyond memory, reaching back into a world where our earliest chapters were written not in words, but in bone and motion and quiet survival. After Lucy stepped into the light of science and reshaped our understanding of human origins, researchers turned their eyes back to the African landscape with renewed curiosity. Her presence, delicate yet transformative, opened a door into deep time, but it also revealed how many questions remained unanswered. The ancient world she came from was vast, and she was only one voice among many. Her discovery did not finish the story. It encouraged the search for others who lived before her, beside her, or after her, each one holding a different piece of the long evolutionary puzzle. In the years that followed, Africa offered more of its treasures. Some were small, some nearly complete, and all of them carried whispers of early hominin life. These fossils arrived like faint echoes across time, adding clarity in some places and deepening the mystery in others. One of these voices belonged to a child who lived long before Lucy was ever born. Her tiny bones were found in the Dakika region of Ethiopia and named Selam, a word that means peace in the local language. She was 3 years old when she died, her body resting for more than 3 million years in the sediment that preserved her. Her skeleton was remarkably complete, offering a rare look into childhood during a time when early hominins were still learning how to navigate the world on two legs. Selim carried traits both familiar and unfamiliar. Her spine curved in a way that supported upright walking, yet her shoulder blades were shaped for climbing. Her small face bore the lightness of youth, but her brain case revealed a slow pace of growth, suggesting that long childhoods, a defining feature of humans, had already taken root in the distant past. She expanded Lucy's story by showing how young members of her species grew, played, and moved. She deepened the understanding of early development, revealing that even in ancient landscapes, children learned through exploration and close bonds with their groups. Another voice arose from deep within a South African cave. The skeleton, discovered after a long and delicate excavation, was known as Littlefoot. She lay hidden in a labyrinth of stone for perhaps 3 million years or more. Her body was almost intact, her bones in positions that suggested a life interrupted suddenly in the quiet of an underground passage. Unlike Lucy, Littlefoot belonged to a species that may have formed another branch of the hominin tree. Her legs were long and strong, built for walking, yet her arms and hands carried signs of skilled climbing. Her presence complicated the idea of a single pathway to upright movement. She reminded researchers that evolution unfolds through overlapping experiments, not through simple progressions. Then came another discovery from Ethiopia, a being named Ardi. Her full name, Ardipithecus ramidus, belonged to a species more ancient than Lucy, living more than 4 million years ago. Ardi was small and slender, with a grasping big toe that helped her move among trees. Her pelvis suggested a creature transitioning between life in the canopy and life on the ground. She did not walk exactly like Lucy, nor like modern humans. Her gait was unique, a blend of balancing upright and gripping branches. Ardi pushed the story of bipedalism deeper into time, reminding scientists that the path toward walking did not begin with Lucy, but with ancestors whose names are still being uncovered. Each of these discoveries, and many others scattered across the continent, expanded the picture that Lucy first illuminated. They added richness to the evolutionary timeline while also complicating it. The neat story once imagined, a single line from ancient ape to modern human, dissolved into something far more intricate. Instead of a ladder, the pattern of human evolution became a branching grove. Some branches ended, some merged, some continued quietly into the present day. The puzzle remains incomplete. Fossils survive only through rare accidents, and most ancient bones have long since returned to dust. What we have are fragments, saved by chance and rediscovered by persistence. Each new find rearranges the edges of the picture, revealing shapes that were not seen before. The pieces do not always fit neatly, yet each one matters. Each one is a reminder that understanding deep time requires patience. The land beneath Africa still holds secrets. Riverbeds shift. Erosion exposes new layers of soil. Wind uncovers fragments that once lay hidden. Scientists walk across these landscapes with careful steps, scanning the ground for small pieces of bone or teeth that may change the human story yet again. They kneel in silence, brushing away grain after grain of sediment, listening for clues in the shapes that emerge. The search continues not because Lucy left gaps, but because she revealed how much history waits below the surface. She showed that the timeline is deeper than imagined, that our origins stretch far beyond the boundaries of written memory. Her discovery encouraged a generation of researchers to look backward with new eyes, to seek the ancestors who lived before her and the cousins who shared her world. And so, the story of early evolution remains open. It is a quiet unfolding, shaped by bone, soil, and time. Each new fossil adds a note to the ancient chorus, and together they guide us through the long and winding path that led to the present. Lucy is one voice in that chorus, but she is not alone. Beneath the African earth, others are still waiting to be found. When Lucy's bones were finally lifted from the Ethiopian earth and brought into the quiet of research labs, no one fully understood how central she would become to the study of human origins. In the years that followed, her skeleton turned into something more than an ancient remnant. It became a foundation, a reference point, a kind of compass that scientists use to orient themselves as they piece together the story of evolution. Within the scientific community, Lucy is often described as a cornerstone fossil. This phrase sounds solid and simple, like a stone laid at the base of a structure, but the meaning runs deeper. Her bones offered such completeness, such clarity of form, that they became the measure against which all other early hominin fossils would be compared. Before her discovery, the timeline of human evolution was a scattered constellation of guesses and fragments. After her, that constellation gained a center of gravity. Researchers use her skeleton to calibrate the pace of evolutionary change. The angles of her legs, The shape of her pelvis and the curve of her spine provide a clear picture of what upright walking looked like more than 3 million years ago. When fossils older than Lucy are discovered, their traits are measured against hers to see how far back particular adaptations might stretch. When younger fossils appear, scientists examine how much they differ from Lucy to understand what changed and why. She forms a reference line that helps measure the speed at which early hominins transformed. Her bones also help scientists study patterns of physical adaptation. The thickness of her long bones offers clues about her daily activity levels. The ridges, where muscles once attached, reveal the strength and balance required for life on open ground. When researchers uncover a femur, tibia, or pelvis from another species, they compare the surfaces and angles to Lucy's. Through these comparisons, they can tell whether a newly found creature walked with the same confidence, or whether it still leaned heavily on tree climbing. In this way, Lucy becomes a silent mentor, guiding the classification and understanding of each new discovery. Her teeth contribute to a broader understanding of ancient diets. The wear on her molars and the chemistry preserved within her enamel act as signals of what her species ate and how they responded to shifting climates. Scientists studying other hominins use these clues to map the changes in vegetation, rainfall, and available resources across millions of years. Lucy's data becomes the baseline from which broader patterns emerge. She does not stand alone in this story. Instead, she anchors a larger web of environmental and biological shifts. Her skull, though small, offers insights into the early stages of brain evolution. The shape of the cranial vault, the position of the foramen magnum, and the structure of her jaw help researchers understand how early hominins balanced walking with feeding, sight with movement, and instinct with awareness. Comparative studies begin with her because she provides a complete example of an early form of the lineage that would one day lead to humans. Even migration patterns are traced in part through her remains. By placing Lucy within a specific time and place, scientists can map where her species lived, how they moved, and how later species expanded their range. Every time researchers uncover another hominin fossil in East Africa or beyond, they ask how that individual relates to Lucy. Is it older, suggesting an ancestor that came before her? Is it younger, offering a continuation of adaptations that began in her time? Or does it represent another branch entirely, one that took a different path in the story of evolution? These questions rely on the firm footing that Lucy provides. Her legacy also extends into the methods scientists use. Her discovery encouraged a shift toward multidisciplinary research, combining geology, biology, chemistry, and anthropology. The volcanic ash that helped date her skeleton inspired new approaches to understanding the ages of fossils. The sediments around her bones revealed how environmental conditions could be reconstructed from the smallest grains of soil. The completeness of her skeleton showed how much could be learned when patience and care guided excavation, and perhaps most importantly, every new fossil must answer to her story. When researchers find a fragment of a jaw or a single tooth, they compare it to Lucy's anatomy before assigning it a place in the evolutionary tree. When a nearly complete skeleton appears, its significance is measured against the clarity Lucy provided. She remains a constant point of reference, a standard carved by nature and revealed by chance. In this way, Lucy is not only a relic of the past, she is a tool for the future. Her presence shapes research strategies, influences the questions scientists ask, and guides the interpretation of each new discovery. She helps refine the timeline of human origins and illuminates the pathways our ancestors walked long before recorded history. Through all the layers of scientific detail, her significance remains rooted in something simple. She offers a clear picture in a story filled with fragments. She stands at a turning point in evolution, not because she is the first or the last, but because she is one of the few who arrived almost whole, carrying enough of herself to speak across deep time. As long as scientists continue to search for answers buried beneath ancient soils, Lucy will remain beside them in spirit, her bones whispering guidance through the careful rhythm of discovery. When Lucy first stepped into the world of modern eyes, she arrived not only as a fossil or a scientific breakthrough, but as a presence. Something about her, fragile yet enduring, stirred a quiet recognition in people across the globe. It was not her size, or the details of her anatomy, or even the age she carried in her bones. It was something softer, something that science alone could not fully explain. Humanity felt drawn to her, as if meeting a distant relative whose name had been forgotten, but whose face still held a familiar shape. Her discoverers named her Lucy. It was a simple choice, made on a night lit by music and dusty lanterns, but that name carried a weight that reached far beyond the research camp in Ethiopia. Giving her a name made her more than a specimen. It allowed people to imagine her as an individual, a living being who once walked, climbed, and breathed beneath the same sky that we do. The name turned her from an object into someone. It softened the distance of time. Humanity needed that. In a world where the past often feels unreachable, Lucy acted as a bridge. Before her discovery, the early chapters of human evolution were shadowed by gaps and fragments. Bones were scattered, few and incomplete, offering glimpses rather than stories. It was easy to see those early ancestors as abstractions, ideas instead of beings. Lucy changed that by providing a nearly complete form. She gave science something to hold, and she gave imagination something to enter. People looked at her skeleton and saw vulnerability. They saw strength lived quietly, not in the way of warriors or mythic heroes, but in the endurance of an ancient creature navigating a harsh world with instinct and resilience. In that reflection, many found a sense of connection. Lucy reminded them that the human story did not begin with monuments or tools or language. It began with simple steps, with movement across Earth, with adaptation to changing landscapes, with survival shared among small groups who needed one another. She also reshaped how people understand their origins. Before her, ideas about early humans were often shaped by assumptions, myths, or selective histories. Lucy brought evidence that could not be ignored. She showed that humanity did not appear suddenly or fully formed. It grew slowly, over countless generations, each one contributing something small but essential. Her bones revealed that upright walking was older than anyone imagined, that intelligence evolved gradually, that change is a patient force. This altered more than scientific models. It altered the way people related to the past. Instead of imagining ancestors as distant and unrelated, Lucy encouraged people to see themselves as part of something continuous. The long chain of existence that leads to the present is not made of strangers. It is made of beings who lived, struggled, and adapted in ways that echo the rhythms of life today. In classrooms, children saw her and asked questions about where they came from. In museums, visitors lingered before her display, sensing something almost spiritual in her presence. In conversations, debates, and quiet reflections, Lucy opened space for people to consider the origins of their own bodies, their own instincts, their own place within the vastness of Earth's history. Her impact also reached beyond emotion. She helped soften the perceived divide between science and identity. Many people think of science as a collection of data points or distant facts. Lucy challenged this idea by embodying the emotional power of discovery. She invited people to feel curiosity, wonder, and humility all at once. Her story reminded the world that science is not only about measurement and analysis, it is about belonging. It is about finding one's place in the long unfolding of time. In her silence, Lucy gave voice to a truth that resonates deeply. The past is not separate from us. It is carried within us, in every step we take, in the way our bodies move, in the shape of our bones, and in the instincts that guide us more than we realize. When people saw Lucy, they saw the beginnings of that inheritance. They saw the faint outline of themselves, drawn in ancient lines of bone. She reminds us that we are not alone in our story. We are part of a lineage that stretches far beyond memory, held together by endurance, adaptation, and the quiet persistence of life. And through her, the distant past feels a little closer, a little warmer, a little more familiar, as if a light has been turned on in a room long believed to be dark. Lucy is a reminder that our connection to the earth runs deeper than culture, deeper than language, deeper even than history. She shows that science, at its heart, is not only the study of the world, it is the study of ourselves. When we look at the world around us today, filled with towers of steel, glowing screens, and long roads that stretch across continents, it is easy to forget that the story of humanity began with quiet footsteps pressed into soft, ancient soil, yet the echoes of those footsteps remain within us. They shape the way we stand, the way we learn, the way we gather, and the way we sense the world. In subtle ways, Lucy and her kind live on in every one of us. One of the clearest echoes lies in the simple act of walking upright. It feels ordinary now, as natural as breathing, something we rarely notice unless pain or fatigue interrupts it. But the ability to rise on two legs, to balance our weight on narrow feet, to take long strides across the earth, began long before modern humans appeared. The posture that supports our spine, the tilt of our pelvis, and the rhythm of our gait carry the imprint of ancient adaptations. We walk not because our bodies were designed suddenly or recently, but because countless generations walked before us. Their survival shaped the structure we inherit. Every time we rise from a chair or step onto a path, we echo a decision made millions of years ago, when early hominins left the safety of trees and began exploring open ground. Lucy's lineage was part of that transition, adjusting to a world where vision, balance, and endurance mattered. The way our heads rest atop our spines, the swing of our arms, and the arch of our feet hold the memory of those early explorations. Upright walking did not arise for our sake alone. It grew out of landscapes shaped by shifting seasons, open plains, and the distant silhouettes of predators. Curiosity forms another strand of this ancient echo. Humans explore almost everything. We reach for objects as children, we ask questions, we observe patterns and wonder why they exist. This curiosity once guided Lucy's species through uncertain terrain. It encouraged them to test new food sources, to investigate sounds carried by the wind, and to learn the routes that led to safety or nourishment. Curiosity was not a luxury, it was a survival tool. The same instinct continues today, though it now leads us into books, experiments, art, and technology. The spark that pushes us to understand the world is older than our species. It is a gentle inheritance from ancestors who needed awareness to navigate danger and opportunity. Social cooperation, too, has ancient roots. Humans are drawn to one another. We form bonds, families, friendships, and communities, not only for comfort but for stability. This behavior reflects patterns that began long before language or culture. Lucy lived in groups where members depended on each other. They shared food, protected the young, and stayed alert for threats. Living together increased their chances of survival. Over time, these habits shaped emotional structures within the mind. They encouraged empathy, recognition of familiar faces, and responses to fear or comfort expressed by others. In modern life, cooperation takes many forms, from simple acts of kindness to complex systems of shared responsibility. Our ability to teach, learn, and support one another arose from small groups gathered under ancient skies. Those early connections built the framework for societies that would eventually grow into villages, cities, and nations. When we reach out to help someone, when we listen, when we feel drawn to protect a child or stand beside a friend, we touch a part of ourselves shaped long ago. Even the way we parent carries echoes of Lucy's world. Humans invest years into raising children, offering care far beyond basic needs. This extended childhood gives space for learning and emotional development, a pattern that began in species where survival depended not on strength alone, but on shared knowledge and careful nurturing. The patience required to feed, teach, and protect the young has roots in early hominin groups that learned to work together. The tenderness expressed in a parent's touch or a guardian's watchful presence is part of an ancient rhythm. Awareness, that quiet sense of connection to our surroundings, also reflects a deep evolutionary memory. The ability to sense danger, to interpret subtle sounds, or to feel the presence of others comes from ancestors who learned to read the world without relying on words. Today, this awareness may appear in moments of stillness, when we feel the air change before a storm, or when we sense a shift in someone's mood. These patterns, though softened by modern life, remain within us. Every step we take, every bond we form, every moment of attention or curiosity continues something Lucy began. She walked long before us, yet her footsteps shape our own. She lived in a world filled with uncertainty, yet her adaptations gave rise to traits that help us navigate our own lives. Her story is not separate from ours. It forms the early chapters of a book still being written. We are the continuation of her journey. We carry within us the shadows of her movements, the beginnings of her instincts, the earliest sparks of awareness that would one day grow into consciousness and culture. Though millions of years divide us, the thread connecting our lives is unbroken. It runs quietly beneath everything we do, reminding us that the past is never lost. It lives within our bones, our minds, and the gentle persistence with which we move through the world. There are moments in Earth's history when memory slips quietly into the ground, pressed beneath shifting layers of sand and silt, carried downstream by rivers, or scattered by the feet of animals that leave no trace of their own passing. Most lives that ever graced this planet disappeared without a whisper. Their bones dissolved, their stories unraveled, and their echoes faded into the soil. Yet every so often, the world pauses long enough to hold a single life still. It protects it from the slow, dissolving hand of time. It lifts it across ages and offers it, intact enough for us to read. Lucy is one of these rare memories. Fossils are small miracles of circumstance. They are what remains when chance and geology work in delicate harmony. For most creatures, death is followed by decay. Scavengers clean the bones, rain softens them. Sunlight breaks what remains. Even stone-hard structures crumble in a matter of years or centuries. For a skeleton to survive millions of years, the world must move in a precise sequence. Soft earth must cover it, sediment must shield it, minerals must replace the fragile tissue, pressure must hold everything still, not too harsh and not too gentle. Then the planet must lift those layers again with tectonic patience. Mountains rise, valleys sink, rivers carve their paths. Only when the ancient grave comes close enough to the surface does discovery become possible. Out of all the living things that walked beside Lucy, only a few scattered pieces remain. Her companions, her predators, the plants she touched, The animals that grazed near her and the countless insects that moved through the grass all vanished from the fossil record. Their bodies returned to the earth as if they had never existed. Even within her species, millions of individuals lived entire lives in the Pliocene light. They raised young, searched for food, navigated danger, and slipped eventually into the soil. None of them endured in stone the way she did. The rarity of her preservation becomes even more striking when we consider the vastness of time. 3 million years is long enough for rivers to change course, for shorelines to retreat, for grasslands to become forests, and forests to thin into dust. It is long enough for continents to shift and for climates to rewrite themselves. It is long enough for everything that surrounded her to disappear, yet she remained, not by design or destiny, but through an improbable chain of events that could have broken at any moment. Imagine the landscape shortly after she fell. The earth around her was still warm from volcanic activity. Winds carried dust from faraway hills. Small animals passed through, unaware of the quiet story beneath their feet. As seasons came and went, rainfall layered thin sheets of sediment over her bones. Each layer pressed gently, sealing her from scavengers and slowing the work of decay. Time, which erases so much, protected her instead. Minerals seeped into the tiny hollows within her bones, replacing what had once been living tissue. Slowly, she transformed into something both fragile and enduring. She became stone. Hundreds of thousands of years passed. The world above her changed again. Herds migrated across new routes shaped by shifting climates. Early hominins, distant cousins of her species, appeared and vanished. The land cracked under droughts and flourished after sudden rains. Generation after generation lived and died without knowing that one of their ancient ancestors rested beneath the surface, held in patient stillness. Much later, tectonic forces lifted her resting place. Erosion carved away the layers above. The desert air exposed small fragments near the surface. When Donald Johanson and his team walked through that landscape in 1974, they stepped across countless stones, unaware that one of them carried a voice from the deep past. Her uncovering was not just a scientific moment, it was the return of a memory the world had almost lost. This fragility reminds us how thin the line is between forgetting and remembering. For billions of years, life has moved across this planet, each creature shaped by the pressures of its time. Very little of it remains for us to study. When we hold a fossil in our hands, we are touching something impossibly rare, a survivor of a process that erases nearly everything. Lucy's bones are more than relics. They are guardians of a story that could have vanished. Her survival invites a quiet sense of gratitude, not directed at any single force, but at the delicate interplay between nature and chance. It feels almost like a breath held across eons. The world could easily have forgotten her. The wind could have scattered her bones. The soil could have consumed them. A shift in the earth could have crushed them. None of these things happened. Instead, she waited. And because she waited, we remember. There is a quiet moment, somewhere between thought and breath, when the long sweep of time folds gently together. The ancient world of shifting grass and volcanic dust touches the modern world of lights, roads, and voices. In that soft crossing, Lucy's story meets ours, not in dramatic shouts or sudden revelations, but in the simple rhythm of movement, the steady rise and fall of footsteps that have been repeating for millions of years. Everything we have explored so far, from her world of predators and open plains to the delicate unraveling of her bones from the earth, forms a single thread. It stretches across ages that feel almost too large to imagine, yet the thread remains unbroken. It runs from the early morning when she stepped onto the cool Pliocene savannah, all the way to the moment we step out of our homes into busy streets lit by lamps and surrounded by sound. Her world and ours could not look more different, but the motion that carried her across the landscape carries us still. When Lucy walked, she did not walk with intention or philosophy. She walked because the earth required it. She moved to find food, to care for the young, to escape danger, and to stay with her group. That simple act of balancing on two legs was the beginning of a story she could not understand. Yet it shaped every chapter that followed. Survival sculpted her body, and her body left an imprint on ours. The tilt of her pelvis, the curve of her spine, the alignment of her feet all contributed to the posture we now use without thinking. We often imagine the distance between instinct and reflection as immense. But if we let the story settle quietly around us, we begin to see how one leads gently into the other. Instinct guided her steps. Instinct kept her near her group. Instinct taught her when to climb into the trees and when to descend. Over countless generations, these instincts grew more complex. They formed the beginnings of memory, shared experience, and emotional bonds. From there, the earliest sparks of understanding appeared, not language as we know it, but patterns of awareness that allowed early hominins to pass knowledge through action and presence. Those first flickers eventually expanded into thoughts that could stretch across years, then into communication, then into stories, then into the ability to look back at the world and wonder how everything came to be. By the time humans took their first steps into symbolic speech, into art carved on bone or painted on stone, Lucy's long shadow stretched quietly behind them. Her life helped set the stage for all the transformations that came later, from the invention of tools to the development of villages, cities, and civilizations. The silence that shaped her world slowly gave way to voices. Instinct broadened into reflection. The creatures who once scanned the grass for predators eventually lifted their eyes to the sky and began asking questions about stars, time, and the meaning of things. None of this would have been possible without the earliest choices made by bodies like hers, adapted for endurance and stability. Upright walking freed the hands, freed the lungs, freed the possibilities. When scientists uncovered her bones in 1974, they were not simply finding a skeleton. They were rediscovering the beginning of a long path, one that touches everything about the way we live now. They found the first recognizable outline of ourselves, and in doing so, they brought her voice back into the world, not through sound, but through presence. Her bones became a way for us to remember what time had almost erased. Lucy did not know she was part of anything larger. She moved through the grasslands, unaware of the future, unaware that her steps would echo into a time when the ground beneath her would be studied, mapped, and cherished. She simply lived, as all creatures do, guided by the needs of each day. Yet through her quiet journey, a new chapter of life opened, one that would lead to art, science, memory, community, and the endless curiosity that defines us now. So as this story draws to a gentle close, the thread she began continues forward. It winds through generations, shaping bodies and minds, shaping landscapes of thought and imagination. It invites us to notice what is ancient within us, carried softly in the way we stand, breathe, learn, and connect. When you walk tomorrow, know that you are finishing a journey that began 3 million years ago with her.